Chapter 1287. Cold sweat had already appeared on Vladimir's forehead. He wiped the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand and tried his best to remain calm. He nodded along with Hua Xiaoheng's words. Major General Hua is right. I'll go back and find out which idiot made the decision. You'll go back and find out? No. Right away? Hua Xiaoheng raised an eyebrow. You don't know who made the decision? Your subordinates were being tested, so no one would only know you, their superior? Vladimir, you're the second in command of the KGB, aren't you a fake? These words completely infuriated Vladimir and touched his sore spot. Vasily's decision to act on his own, his guilt and uneasiness towards Lena, and his anger at Hua Xiaoheng's coercion intertwined and broke through his restraint. He suddenly raised his head, and his calmness from before disappeared. He glared at Hua Xiaoheng fiercely. I'm a fake second in command? I'll show you. What do you mean by a real second in command? Vladimir took out his phone, dialed a number and spoke a string of Russian to the operator on the other end of the line. In his anger, he had forgotten that Hua Xiaoheng could also speak Russian. The supervisory department at the headquarters? As the second in command of the KGB, I order you to immediately investigate the head of the political division at the headquarters, Comrade Vasily. Not only does he have a questionable style of work, but he also has the possibility of colluding with the enemy in his work. Colluding with which enemy? If I knew, why would I need you to investigate? Hurry up and investigate. Yes, lock him up alone. If any of you dare to tip him off, you'll be the next ones to be investigated. Vladimir roared. The resentment in the bottom of his heart was finally vented. Vasily had always been cautious and he had a lot of dirt on people. Ordinary people didn't dare to touch him, nor could they. However, Vladimir had provided an important clue, which was the problem of his style. It had instantly opened up a gap. There were too many people who had been bullied by Vasily. Without the protection of the higher-ups, he would be played to death by others at any time. Vladimir hung up the phone and said coldly to Hua Xiaoheng, Major General Hua, are you satisfied now? I'll get to the bottom of it and find out who's behind it. He also felt that something was wrong now. Even if they wanted to find out if Lena was a spy from the Huaxia Empire, there was no need to use Song Jining and Gun Yanji as test subjects. Everyone in the KGB knew that Gun Yanji was Hua Xiaoheng's fiancée and Song Jining was Hua Xiaoheng's biological mother. Even if it was a joke, it was too much to do such a thing in front of others. No one is going to sit back and laugh it off. It was completely normal for Hua Xiaoheng to be angry. It would be strange if he wasn't angry. Vladimir calmed down and said sincerely, Major General Hua, I understand how you feel. I will personally apologize to Miss Song and Sirius. Hua Xiaoheng nodded. His tone softened a little but his attitude was still a little stiff. I'll wait and see. You have a good subordinate who spoke up for you. If it wasn't for Ivan's guarantee that you wouldn't do such a brainless thing, do you think I would let this go? Then he turned around and left. After Hua Xiaoheng left, Vladimir stood alone under the tree for a long time. The breeze blew gently and the birch forest was singing. His eyes were filled with green mountains and clear waters. Vladimir's heart was both hot and cold. He didn't expect that unreliable Ivan would actually stand on his side at such a critical moment and speak up for him. And Lena. For the first time he had the idea of starting a family. He wanted a family. There was someone by his side who would never leave him. When he was in pain, when he was lonely, when he was framed and when he was attacked, someone would stand by his side. Could this person be Lena? Vladimir had a good impression of Lena, but it would still take time for this good impression to develop into love. Just as his thoughts were running wild, someone patted him heavily on the shoulder. Boss? What are you doing? He looked up and saw the driver Ivan's enlarged face. Vladimir's face was immediately expressionless. What's wrong? Nothing. Nothing? The expression on your face just now could be said to be very disgusting. You looked so touched that you deserved a beating. The middle-aged driver had always been rude when talking to him. You're the one who deserves a beating. Vladimir kicked him and said, I just ordered the KGB's inspection department to investigate Vasily. Huh. You finally made a move. The middle-aged driver was excited. He grabbed Vladimir's shoulder and shook it desperately. Boss, I've been with you for so long, and what you did today made me the happiest. It was Vladimir's turn to be disgusted. He pushed the middle-aged driver's hand away and said angrily, Get lost. I don't know you. He then swiped open his phone and planned to apologize to Gunyenji and ask her if she needed a doctor to examine him. However, after searching through his phone's contact list, he didn't see her phone number. He couldn't remember Gu Nianji's phone number, so he opened WeChat. When he sent a message, the system displayed, "You're not a friend of the other party yet, Vladimir." Unwilling to give up, he opened WeChat again and tried to send a message. He found the dialog box from the last time the two of them chatted, entered the message and pressed send. It was still, "You're not a friend of the other party. Please add him as a friend before chatting." Vladimir was going crazy. Sirius deleted me? The middle-aged driver quickly opened his phone and looked at the discussion group of 3 people on WeChat. He said regretfully, "The KGB trio has become a 2-person group. You're no longer in the discussion group. Oh no, you've offended Sirius. There won't be any red packets in the future." The middle-aged driver clicked on his exclusive red packet and was elated. Vladimir gripped his phone and glared at the middle-aged driver. "Give me her phone number." Although the middle-aged driver was reluctant, he still sent Gu Nianji's number to Vladimir. Vladimir dialed and found that the other party's number was still on the line. He waited patiently for 5 minutes, but Gu Nianji's phone was still on the line. What was going on? Vladimir grabbed the middle-aged driver's phone and used it to call Gu Nianji. This time the call went through directly. It turned out that not only had Gu Nianji deleted his friend list, but she had also blocked his phone number. His heart was boiling with anger when the call went through. Gu Nianji's sweet and soft voice came from the phone. "Hello, Uncle Ivan. What's wrong? What can I do for you?" Vladimir composed himself and said, "Sirius, it's Vladimir." Without waiting for Gu Nianji to hang up, Vladimir quickly added, "It was our fault for what happened this morning. I apologize to you. I promise to punish the person responsible. I've already sent someone to investigate him. I'll definitely give you an explanation." Since Vladimir had already said that, Gu Nianji couldn't hang up the phone anymore. She leaned against the 4-poster bed in the suite of the resort villa and said in a reserved manner, "Mr. Lieutenant General Vladimir, the lives of ordinary people are like grass. I hope you can be magnanimous and stop using ordinary people like us. It's a misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding. I didn't expect them to go so far. Don't blacklist me. Without your red packets, how can I live?" Vladimir's face was aggrieved, and he spoke as if he had completely submitted to the red packets. "When I think about how no one will ever send me a big red packet again after you blacklist me, this feeling of suffocation is simply one disaster after another." Vladimir's words could be said to be very flattering. The middle-aged driver looked at him with his mouth agape and gave his boss a thumbs up for his flexible spirit. Vladimir kicked him fiercely, then turned around and continued to coax Gu Nianji. As the second in command of the KGB, he could make very few friends. Gu Nianji was one of the few friends he felt he could make. She was much better than her cunning fiancé Hua Xiaoheng. Besides, Vladimir couldn't directly add Hua Xiaoheng as a friend, so he couldn't cut off Gu Nianji. He clenched his fist. He had to add her as a friend. This was the 3rd update of the day, chapter 1277, "I have to add you as a friend." It was the end of the month, so he had to continue nagging for monthly votes. Mwah. Chapter 1288. Vladimir tried his best to put in a good word for Gu Nianji. In order to calm her down, he even told her how he had dealt with Vasily. "Sirius, I know you were scared today. Don't worry, I've already locked up the person who came up with the evil idea. He won't come out and cause trouble again." Gu Nianji rolled her eyes. "Do you know who came up with the idea? It's your man? Why would he do that?" Vladimir didn't expect Gu Nianji to be so sharp. She immediately guessed that it was someone from the KGB. His scalp went numb and he was very worried that he had leaked the secret. However, since he had already said it, even if the secret was leaked, it was already leaked. If he could add Gu Nianji as a friend again, then his leaking the secret would be valuable. Therefore Vladimir said half-truthfully, "That person has a problem with me. He can't stand the sight of my elite troops and wants to get rid of my people, so he set up this trap to make me fail the mission." Gu Nianji replied with an "oh," and felt even more unhappy. She pouted and said, "So he's targeting you and your men? But why do they have to use us as an example? Miss Song and I aren't from your country. He's doing this because he doesn't care about us. My life is worthless. I really don't deserve to be friends with the KGB. Who knows, I might be sacrificed by you for no reason one day. Alright, I'm hanging up." "Don't hang up." Vladimir was anxious. "You really can't do this. The Huaxia Empire is our old friend. We won't let our loved ones suffer and our enemies be happy. So don't worry, I'll definitely help you vent your anger." Not only did he want Gu Nianji to vent her anger, but more importantly he wanted Hua Xiaoheng to calm down. Otherwise, Vladimir really didn't dare to imagine what kind of trouble Hua Xiaoheng would cause him. Seeing that Vladimir had already said this, Gunyanji was slightly relieved. She smiled and said, "Okay, I'll wait and see. Is there anything else? I'm hanging up." "Don't." Vladimir stopped her again. After hesitating for a long time, he whispered, "Then are you still going to block my number?" Gunyanji. He lowered his head expressionlessly and removed Vladimir's phone number from the block. He pulled it out of the list and said perfunctorily, "Okay, it's out." Vladimir quickly took out his phone and dialed Gunyanji's number. This time the call went through immediately. Gunyanji switched to Vladimir's number and replied, "Are you relieved now? I'm not blacklisted anymore." "And WeChat and QQ?" Vladimir's voice became softer and softer, afraid that the middle-aged driver next to him would hear him. Gunyanji mulled it over for a while, then clicked accept. She sent a message to Vladimir, "I treat you as a friend, don't let this happen a second time." Vladimir quickly shook his head. No, there won't be a second time. This time it was a complete accident." Vladimir added back and realized that he had entered the KGB trio's discussion group again. He was instantly in high spirits. In a moment of happiness, he also sent Gunyanji an exclusive red packet. Although it wasn't as extravagant as hers, the red packet of 66 yuan was already painful enough for Vladimir. He couldn't afford to get a red packet without his real name verified. The middle-aged driver took his phone and heard a ding sound. He realized that Vladimir had actually sent a red packet. He quickly clicked on it and saw that it was Gunyanji's exclusive red packet. Ha! The middle-aged driver rolled his eyes and turned to leave. Because of the sudden explosion of the Huaxia Empire survey instrument, the work of the scientists from both countries stopped for a day. Everyone had rested and reorganized. After all the instruments were re-examined by the Russian KGB and the Huaxia Special Operations Forces, they were sent back to the scientists for further use. Early the next morning, Gunyanji woke up and found that Hua Xiaoheng was no longer in the tent. She had slept early the night before, and Hua Xiaoheng had returned late. Seeing that she was fast asleep, he resisted the urge to touch her and hugged her to sleep for the entire night. Before dawn, he had woken up to help Song Jining set up the instruments again. Gunyanji came out of the tent, took a deep breath and stretched. The air in the valley was as fresh as the first snowfall in winter. It was refreshing with a biting chill. Gunyanji walked around the tent a few times. The morning dew had wet the tips of her eyebrows and hair. Her eyes were wet and crystal clear. The middle-aged driver came out from behind the tent. When he saw her come out, he greeted her happily. "Serious, you're awake? I'll take you to breakfast." Gunyanji nodded with a smile. "Did Major General Hua ask you to wait for me here? How did you know?" The middle-aged driver scratched his head. Vladimir followed Major General Hua to the giant circular pit early in the morning. Lena and Peter also went. "I didn't want to go, hee. Gunyanji covered her mouth with a smile. She thought to herself that Ivan was really naturally cheerful and optimistic to be able to survive in the KGB. She liked to be friends with cheerful and sunny people. That way her mood would be better and she wouldn't have to feel sorry for herself every day and receive the negative energy of others. Gunyanji got into the middle-aged driver's car and went to the resort villa with him. After returning to the resort villa, Gunyanji first went to the suite that she and Hua Xiaoheng shared to wash up, then went to the dining room for breakfast. They went early enough, but of course they were still a little later than the scientists. The two of them had soft-boiled eggs, butter-fried bacon, 2 Russian bacon sausages, and 2 crispy pieces of whole wheat bread. Gunyanji also took 2 small tomatoes the size of quail eggs to decorate. The middle-aged driver looked at the breakfast on Gunyanji's plate, which was about the same as his own. He smiled and gave her a thumbs up. "Serious, you eat a lot but you don't get fat." Gunyanji glared at him. "Eat your food. If you keep spouting nonsense you won't get a red packet for today." The middle-aged driver pursed his lips and asked in confusion, "How did I spout nonsense? I didn't, right? Don't you know that the word fat is the taboo of all women? Whoever touches it will die." Gunyanji waved the knife in front of the middle-aged driver and made a throat-cutting gesture. The middle-aged driver was shocked and quickly pushed her away. "I say, can't you not be fat? I didn't say you were fat. Don't mention the word fat. I'll get angry with anyone who mentions it." Gunyanji rolled her eyes at the middle-aged driver and finished her breakfast in a few bites. She then went to buy the same 2 breakfasts and brought them out in a food box. The middle-aged driver looked at her after getting into the car and asked with a smile, "Is this for Major General Hua? Actually, he should have eaten breakfast already, right?" It doesn't matter even if he has eaten breakfast. Gunyenji smiled and carefully held the food box to her chest. This is his second breakfast. They have a lot of work, so how can they be full from breakfast? The middle-aged driver. Forget it, he was just asking for trouble. He had eaten a meal of dog food for nothing. He was so full, the middle-aged driver drove the car towards the huge circular crater. In the car, Gunyenji beat around the bush and asked about the explosion yesterday. Vladimir was a cunning person. She had blacklisted him, but she couldn't get any more information out of him. She could only start with the middle-aged driver. The middle-aged driver felt that it was fine to tell Gunyenji about this. The key was that they were indeed in the wrong. Besides, they had hated Vasily to death for a long time. Many people had been tricked by him and had suffered from him both openly and secretly. Actually, what happened yesterday was indeed our fault. The middle-aged driver sighed. With such a rat poop, our entire pot of soup was spoiled. As he spoke, he told Gunyenji about what Vasily had done in the political department at the headquarters. In the end, he said, "Our Major Lena is such a good comrade. She has made so many contributions that she's qualified to be promoted to colonel, not to mention lieutenant colonel. She's different from me. I'm just dawdling around every day, while Lena is really risking her life to carry out her mission. Tell me, such a good comrade, yet he still refuses to give her a quick promotion. Who will work for him in the future?" Gunyenji burst out laughing. "Uncle Ivan, you still know that you're dawdling around?" "Of course I know." The middle-aged driver nodded with a smile. "I don't have much ability. In a place like this, if I don't dawdle around, am I supposed to wait to be played to death by my own people or by the enemy?" "You're quite self-aware," Gunyenji joked. "Actually, you don't have to belittle yourself, Uncle Ivan. You're a wise man. Maybe you're better than everyone else." "Ah, it'd be great if I was better than everyone else." The middle-aged driver laughed heartily. "Then wouldn't I be able to receive more red packets?" Gunyenji nodded. Of course. The appearance of red packets has attracted everyone's attention. With Ivan's appearance, who can compete with him? The two of them chatted and laughed and soon arrived at the base on the other side of the giant circular crater. The sun had already risen. White clouds floated in the azure sky. The fog on the side of the giant circular crater was thicker than in other places because there was more water here. The bottom of the giant circular crater was said to be filled with water, so one could look down from above. It was exactly the same as the blue hole in the Caribbean Sea. The more water there was, the more water vapor would evaporate. Although the sun was shining brightly, the place still seemed to be shrouded in a thin layer of fog. Both the people and the equipment were covered with a thin layer of gauze, giving off a translucent and hazy feeling. Xiaoheng was standing next to Song Jining, listening to her discuss data with other scientists. Suddenly, he felt something and turned around to see Gunyenji walking over from the path into the base. She walked through the clouds and the fog, and the trees on the side of the path provided shade. Her figure was indistinct against the fog, as if she would fly away with the wind at any time. Xiaoheng narrowed his eyes and walked up to her. He naturally held her hand and looked at her hair that was wet with dew. "Why didn't you wear a hat? This dew is too cold. Be careful not to get a headache." "It's okay. The sun will dry it in a while." Gunyenji shook her head nonchalantly and handed the food box to Xiaoheng. She smiled and said, "I brought this for you. It's freshly baked, hot, soft-boiled eggs, butter-fried bacon, bacon-roasted sausages and whole wheat bread. It's exactly the same as what I had for breakfast." Xiaoheng had woken up early this morning to help Song Jining sort out the equipment, so he hadn't actually had time to eat breakfast. However, he was used to having a full meal when he was hungry, so he didn't feel anything was wrong. It wasn't until he saw the breakfast Gunyenji had bought for him that he felt that his stomach was indeed rumbling with hunger. He quietly carried it over and said gently, "Thank you, I just so happened to be hungry." Gunyenji quickly followed him to the folding chair next to him and sat down. She opened the food box for him to eat breakfast. While Xiaoheng was eating breakfast, Gunyenji went to watch Song Jining do the test. "Good morning, Miss Song." Gunyenji greeted her with a smile. "Have you had breakfast?" "I bought 2 breakfasts from there." Song Jining shook her head. "I ate a piece of bread and drank a glass of milk. I'm not hungry." She was concentrating on the instrument when Gunyenji walked over. She stuck her head out to look at the huge circular pit in front of her, wanting to see what was at the bottom of the pit. Song Jining quickly said, "Nyenji, move aside. You're blocking my probe." Gunyenji replied with an "oh," and realized that she was indeed standing right in front of Song Jining's probe. She quickly moved aside. As soon as she moved, Song Jinning's probe suddenly screeched. Beep, beep, beep. Everyone at the base looked over. Xiaoheng threw down the food box and rushed over. He was extremely angry. He didn't know what the KGB was up to this time. But this time he was wrong. This time it had nothing to do with the KGB at all. Song Jinning looked at the probe with her eyes wide open and said loudly, "The magnetic field data has changed. The wave curve is beginning to fold. Everyone start immediately. Record all the data. From now on we can't miss a single second." She looked at the probe in front of her excitedly and began to count down. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As she counted the last number, the fog above the circular crater in front of them became thicker. The fog twisted into ropes and shuttled back and forth in front of them. It was as if a tornado had descended from the sky and twisted the fog into thick ropes. This was the first major chapter of the day, Chapter 1278, Countdown. Thank you everyone for your monthly votes for October. Major General's monthly votes have reached the highest level in history. There will be no double monthly votes this month, so let's go back to the previous monthly votes and add updates. The monthly votes of 300 plus 1 update as well as the tips and updates from the previous 2 months, will all be paid off this month. Whether it's 2 or 3 updates today depends on the monthly votes / greater than over equal to / la 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 moi. Chapter 1289. Gunyinji looked ahead in surprise. The fog above the circular crater was getting thicker and thicker, and the water vapor seemed to be evaporating faster. His body and face were wet as if he was submerged in water. Xiaoheng flew to Gunyinji's side and pulled her back from the crater with one hand. He held Song Jinning's arm with the other to protect the 2 most important women in his life. Gunyinji and Song Jinning didn't notice Xiaoheng at all. Song Jinning stared at the data on the detector in front of her. She didn't even dare to blink for fear that she would miss an important piece of data. The undulating curve formed by the data flipped and moved on the small LCD screen, forming a 3-dimensional cube. The branches inside seemed to have a life of their own, constantly folding and colliding. When a curve at the top of the 3D cube suddenly caved in, and a curve at the bottom suddenly protruded, the middle part of the 2 curves suddenly overlapped. Just as the 2 curves intertwined and overlapped, the thick fog in front of them slowly dispersed. As the fog receded, what appeared in front of them was not a blue sky and white clouds. Instead, it was like a big screen in a movie, from gray to clear and then to dazzling. What appeared in front of them was a scene of heavy traffic. What was going on? The thick fog above the circular crater became a movie screen, reflecting a skyscraper rising from the ground. The pointed roof was very distinctive. Gunyinji could see that it was the Empire State Building in New York City, one of the landmarks of New City. Sunlight shone in between the 2 rows of skyscrapers. On the not very wide road, cars came one after another. The traffic lights kept flashing and the pedestrians on the road hurried to and fro. It was bustling and lively. Statue of Liberty holds her torch high, looking down at the Hudson River. Everyone's eyes followed the sunlight. Like a montage in a movie, the direction suddenly changed and 2 more tall buildings appeared in the thick fog. The Twin Towers. Gunyinji called out in a low voice, her pupils suddenly constricting. Xiaoheng had been on high alert and was not confused by the sudden scene in front of him. Until Gunyinji called out, "Twin." Xiaoheng looked up abruptly. "It's really Twin from Newtown. Tower? Weren't the Twin Towers destroyed by terrorists more than a decade ago? How did he appear in front of everyone?" "Mirage. Oh my God. I actually saw a mirage here." The Russian scientists screamed and scrambled to operate the instruments to record all kinds of data. Gunyinji looked at Song Jinning in confusion. "Miss Song, is this a mirage?" Why did she remember that mirages were usually produced at sea or in the desert? Could a mirage appear in an inland area like Tunguska, Siberia? Song Jinning didn't even raise her head. She looked at the instrument in front of her and calmly said, "Mirage is actually a type of optical phenomenon. When the temperature difference between the surface and the air is relatively large, the hot air will rise, and when light passes through the air layers with different densities, it will refract and project the distance seen to a nearby place. This is what the ancients called a mirage." So it's possible for a mirage to appear here? As long as there are layers of different densities? Gunyinji looked at the fog above the circular crater thoughtfully. Maybe it's because of the fog? But they could actually refract the scene of New City on the other side of the blue planet? But how could the Twin Towers, which had already been destroyed, appear? The terrifying scene of a terrorist plane crashing into a building that had shocked the entire blue planet was still in many people's memories. Song Jining looked up at the monitor on the other side and saw the twin towers that had just appeared. Towers, twin towers? Was also shocked, but she quickly reacted and said in surprise, "This isn't a mirage." The Russian scientist who was busy recording the data and taking videos, said to Song Jining indignantly, "This is clearly a mirage. Look at the angle of the light refraction. These data meet the conditions for a mirage to appear." Song Jining turned to look at the Russian scientists. "But how do you explain the appearance of the twin towers? Why would these two buildings appear in a mirage? Why would these two buildings appear in a mirage when they were clearly destroyed more than a decade ago?" As a phenomenon of light refraction, a mirage always reflects timely scenes, not delayed scenes. The Russian scientists were stunned for a moment. They looked at each other and asked Song Jining in unison, "Then what do you think this is?" "I think." Song Jining paused and swept her gaze across the faces of these people. Finally, her gaze returned to the silhouette of the city that had appeared in the fog in front of her. "I think that what appeared in this fog is New City from more than a decade ago, not the current New City." Everyone, Gu Nianji's heart skipped a beat. She nodded vigorously in agreement with Song Jining's statement. "I think Miss Song is right. Look, in addition to these iconic buildings, there are also the twin towers that were destroyed more than a decade ago. Just look at the way these people are dressed and the style of the phones in their hands. Do you think it's fashionable now?" Gu Nianji's explanation was exactly what Song Jining was thinking. From a purely theoretical point of view, she felt that this was not a mirage in the ordinary sense, but a physical phenomenon with a special meaning. However, Gu Nianji was meticulous and observant. At a glance, she could see things that scientists like them might not have noticed, such as the way they were dressed and even the style of the phones in their hands. In the past decade or so, Song Jining had been in a daze. After she woke up, she had some understanding of the major events that had happened in the past decade or so, but she was not sensitive to these fashions. Although Gu Nianji was young, she was not an internet child for nothing. Thanks to the internet, she had read a lot of information about the terrorist act of the plane crashing into the Twin Towers. She remembered very clearly what the people in those pictures were wearing at that time. At that time, the Apple phone had not yet been invented, and it was not as popular as it was now on Blue Planet. At that time, the most fashionable smartphone was still the BlackBerry. Song Jining continued, "So what we saw wasn't a timely mirage, but this huge circular crater was like a huge antenna that received the light projected from New City more than a decade ago. Then it gathered and formed an image, allowing us to see the situation more than a decade ago." As she spoke, Song Jining looked at Gu Nianji again and smiled. "I remember that Nianji asked me on the first day she came here if we could see with our own eyes the events that happened in history or the era of the dinosaurs if the conditions were right. Now this fog is showing us that it's completely possible." Every moment, light and all kinds of force fields lingered around us. They were also constantly radiating outward even into the future. Song Jining pointed at the scene passionately and said, "Since we can see the neutron star collision more than 100 million years ago through gravitational fluctuations, we can see the situation more than a decade ago through the same gravitational fluctuations. But just like I told this young girl the other day, we can see the neutron star collision because the energy field it produces is huge enough. What kind of energy can this city produce that its scene can be recorded by light and radiated more than a decade later? Even if New City could produce such energy, it would have been destroyed by the energy long ago and would no longer exist. And now that New City hasn't disappeared, it's enough to show that it hasn't carried a huge energy field. So, tell me, how did these scenes radiate from more than a decade ago to more than a decade later, and were received by us?" Song Jining thought for a moment and said, "I think we need to study the exact reason, but I think the transmission process is the same as a television signal. The signal sent out by New City more than a decade ago was received by us more than a decade later, and then it was converted into a visible image by the television." This was the second update of the day. Monthly votes of 300 plus updates. Chapter 1279, Mirage. There was still the third update at 8 p.m. Thank you for your monthly votes. Moi. Chapter 1290. The Russian scientists weren't to be trifled with. When they heard Song Jining say that the process was like sending a signal in a TV series, they couldn't help but sneer and say, "The transmission of a TV signal requires a high-power signal tower. Where do you think there is such a signal tower in New York City that can send the signal more than 10 years into the future? If I say you're delusional, then you're delusional." It was one thing to say that Gu Nianji was delusional, but she actually said that Song Jining was delusional as well. Gu Nianji couldn't take it anymore. She turned to look at the scientist and enunciated each word clearly, Before planes appeared, many ignorant people didn't believe that humans could fly in the sky. Before the telephone appeared, people didn't believe that one day everyone would be able to communicate freely with a small rectangular box. You're a scientist, so I thought your thinking would be a few steps ahead of ordinary people, but now it seems that you don't even have the imagination of ordinary people. The Russian scientist's face turned red from Gu Nianji's rebuke. He wanted to refute her, but he couldn't think of a practical example, so he could only turn his head and sulk. Song Jining patted Gu Nianji's hand with a smile. Don't bother with narrow-minded people. The development of science doesn't depend on individual will. Being blinded by a leaf and looking at the sky from the bottom of a well will only become an obstacle to the development of science. Alright, let's ignore them and do our own thing. Gu Nianji nodded. Miss Song has good self-restraint. I shouldn't argue with ignorant people. Calling the Russian scientist an ignorant person could be said to be very sarcastic and arrogant. However, the other party couldn't refute it because this kind of ignorance wasn't ignorance in terms of knowledge, but ignorance in terms of vision and imagination. These two were also the bottlenecks that restricted the development of science and technology. The other scientists looked at each other, then continued to work and didn't say anything. Wu Xiaoheng personally brought his men to stand guard, worried that something else would happen. He said to Gu Nianji, "Follow me and don't run around." Gu Nianji smiled and agreed, then obediently followed behind him. While Wu Xiaoheng was on guard, she looked around and took pictures with her phone from time to time. Sometimes she took pictures of the scenery, sometimes she took selfies, and sometimes she took selfies with Wu Xiaoheng. Wu Xiaoheng ignored her so she could enjoy herself. The driver, Vladimir, Lena, and Peter were in charge of guarding the Russian scientists. The middle-aged driver made a vomiting gesture as he watched Gu Nianji and Wu Xiaoheng being inseparable like a perfect couple. He laughed and said, "I think I'll be too full of dog food for the next few days." Vladimir was very envious of Wu Xiaoheng. He quickly glanced at Lena beside him and saw that she still had a poker face and was completely indifferent. She didn't have the slightest intention of showing affection with him. He was a little disappointed but also a little itchy. It was his good fortune to be able to gain the favor of such a mentally strong woman. Vladimir thought that Gu Nianji wasn't bad, but she was too delicate. She wasn't his cup of tea. Only a woman like Lena could live with him for the rest of his life. He looked thoughtfully at the side profile of Lena's high cheekbones and said with a smile, "Major Lena, do you want to rest for a while? The three of us are enough." He pointed to the driver and Peter. Lena shook her head. "No, I'm not sleepy." The middle-aged driver looked at them with a grin and quickly said, I'm sleepy. Can I go and rest for a while?" "Get lost." Vladimir's expression instantly changed and he kicked the middle-aged driver away. Peter followed them with drooping, sleepy eyes, his hands clasped behind his back, oblivious to their pleasantries. Time passed and the sun rose higher in the sky. The fog above the circular crater became thinner and thinner, and the image of New York City from more than a decade ago became fainter and fainter. The data captured on the detector also became less and less. In the end, the fog completely dissipated, the image disappeared, and the data could no longer be detected. Only then did Song Jining reluctantly say, "This time with this data, it's worth several years of hard work." She studied magnetic fields, and the changes in the magnetic field here could be said to be the pinnacle of theoretical development. Much of the data should have only been detected in the depths of the universe. Could the Tunguska explosion really have been caused by the impact of a comet? During lunch the scientists were chatting. Gu Nianji couldn't butt in on such a high-level topic. She only picked up a prawn and planned to dip it in hoisin sauce. Wu Xiaoheng quickly picked up a few prawns and fresh Arctic shellfish for her. He placed them on the plate in front of her. Gu Nianji didn't eat alone. She picked up a prawn with a fork and smiled as she put it into Wu Xiaoheng's mouth. Wu Xiaoheng opened his mouth to eat and fed her the Arctic shellfish. The two of them fed each other as if no one else was around. Song Jining watched with a carefree heart. She thought about how she would probably have to prepare for the wedding and the baby's room when she got back. The middle-aged driver had come over with a smile to talk to Gu Nianji, but when he saw this scene, he silently took his plate and left. He returned to Vladimir, Lena, and Peter's side and sat under the tree to eat with them. Vladimir saw the situation between Wu Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji from afar and smiled. "I didn't expect Major General Hua to dote on Sirius so much. TSK, how much does he like her?" Peter looked at him, then placed a grilled prawn on Lena's plate. "Lena?" Vladimir was nervous and didn't hesitate to place his grilled prawn on Lena's plate. The middle-aged driver suddenly stood up. He had lost all hope in this world where people were showing off their affection everywhere. Without looking back, he left the tree and found a secluded place to eat alone. After that day, the scientists' observations came to a standstill. The circular crater seemed to have run out of energy from the projection of the image of New York that day, and no magnetic field data could be detected anymore. Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng held hands and walked on the hillside around the giant circular crater. She looked at the giant circular crater not far away and said with emotion, "Could it be that there really is special energy here?" Whether it was the wave curve that had appeared here at the beginning or the projection of New York from more than a decade ago that had appeared a few days ago, they all pointed to this result. But no one knew what it was. Everyone could only analyze the existing data in an attempt to find a scientific conclusion. However, this conclusion couldn't be obtained in a day or two. Song Jining returned from the giant circular crater in disappointment for several days in a row. On the last day, she stood in front of the giant circular crater and said to Gu Nianji, "I'm afraid there's no research value here for the time being. I think we can go back." Gu Nianji comforted Song Jining, "There's already a lot of good stuff. Go back and study it carefully. The conclusion should be waiting for us not far away." Song Jining nodded with emotion. "I hope we can come to a conclusion immediately. Actually, when I said that it was a projection of the image from more than a decade ago, it was just a bold assumption. We still need to verify it carefully. Our assumption might be right or it might not be. The field of science is broad and profound and anything can happen." "Miss Song, you can do it. I believe in you," Gu Nianji said with a smile. She turned around and saw Lena climbing up a long rope from the bottom of the giant circular crater. Major Lena, why are you here? What's down there? Is it fun? You're so brave to have just gone down." Gu Nianji greeted her in surprise. Lena looked at her calmly and removed the long rope from her waist. She said, "Hello, I'll go down and help the scientists put away the cameras and detection equipment." Song Jining took the long rope and handed it to the staff member beside her. She smiled and said, "Thank you, Major Lena." "You're welcome. I still have a few cameras here. They're from our country's scientists." Lena nodded at them and turned to leave. Vladimir and Peter were standing about 200 meters away from them with the Russian scientists. Gu Nianji asked curiously, "Why are the Russian scientists' cameras on our side?" She had thought that this place was divided into districts. The Wuxia scientists were in one district, and the Russian scientists were in another. Song Jining was amused by her and said, "How can there be districts? Everyone is doing scientific research, so of course there are all kinds of angles. Our cameras are also on their side. That gentleman sent them back to me just now." Song Jining pouted at Peter. Gu Nianji understood and smiled embarrassedly. "I made a fool of myself again. Miss Song is the best. She never laughs at me." If it had been the mean Russian scientist, he would have laughed at her for being ignorant again. As they spoke, a few more staff members climbed up from the bottom of the giant circular crater. They were all tied with long ropes and carried a lot of equipment and cameras in their hands. These people were all from the Wuxia Empire's entourage. Most of them were field personnel from the Special Operations Forces. Gu Nianji saw that Hua Xiaoheng had actually gone down as well. He had mixed in with the personnel and had disguised himself, so most people wouldn't be able to recognize him. However, Gu Nianji was so familiar with him that she could sense him as long as he appeared around her, no matter what he disguised himself as. Of course, she didn't acknowledge him. Since Hua Xiaoheng had chosen to disguise himself, he definitely didn't want anyone to know that he had gone down. Gu Nianji didn't know why he had gone down, but she guessed that it was for his work. She smiled and turned to talk to Song Jining. She accompanied her to pack up the equipment and prepared to return home. That was when something strange happened. There was a loud bang as if the earth was shaking and the mountains were shaking. In fact, the entire ground beneath their feet shook. The mountain rocks rolled down with a rustling sound, almost bringing with it a mudslide. The tall birch forest began to collapse, and the water in the giant circular crater rippled. There were also bursts of flames that shot into the sky and smoke filled the air. Gu Nianji reflexively hugged Song Jining and threw herself to the ground. She rolled towards the open space to avoid the explosion at their feet. On the other side, where the Russian scientists were, the flames of the explosion were even stronger. There was a loud bang at their feet. This time it wasn't a fake, electric spark, but a real explosion. Vladimir didn't have time to think about who could break through his and Hua Xiaoheng's guard and bury the explosives at the edge of the giant circular crater. He just instinctively turned around and used his body to protect the Russian scientist beside him. The blue circular crater appeared in front of him and kept getting bigger. At that moment he saw his life experiences from a young age. He thought regretfully that he hadn't gotten married and hadn't had children yet, At that moment, Lena pounced over without hesitation and used her body to protect Vladimir. The bang was even louder. Lena pushed Vladimir hard, but she couldn't withstand the impact of the explosion. Her feet slipped, and she tumbled rapidly towards the bottom of the giant circular crater. Lena? Vladimir, who had been pushed away, turned around and shouted at the top of his lungs. He wanted to jump down as well, but Peter and the middle-aged driver held him tightly. This was the third update of the day, Chapter 1280, The Earth Shakes. If the monthly votes reached 600, we would continue with the third update tomorrow. Thank you for your monthly votes. Mwah. Chapter 1291. The thick fog beside the giant circular pit had just dissipated when there was another earth-shattering explosion. Smoke filled the air above the entire base. Many of the Russian scientists were affected by the explosion and were lying on the ground, wailing. Vladimir used all his strength, but he couldn't break free from Peter and the driver's iron-like arms. Let go of me. Why are you pulling me? Hurry up and go down to help. Our comrade fell into the huge pit, and his fate is unknown. You still have the nerve to hold my hand. Vladimir roared. The veins on his forehead were about to pop out of his skin. Peter's blue-gray eyes, which had been drooping all this time, widened. He said, "Boss, you trust me. I'll go down and help you find Major Lena." Vladimir nodded first, then quickly shook his head and said in a rough voice, "You can't go. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? No way. Lena is mine. Mine." He was still in the mood to be jealous at a time like this. Peter smiled bitterly and nodded. "Yes, Lena doesn't have any feelings for me. I know, so can I go down and save her? You're in charge up there." The scientists over there seemed to be injured. Only then did Vladimir turn to look at his own base. The equipment was scattered all over the ground. Almost all of them had been blown to pieces, and tiny nuts were scattered among the rocks. Everyone was lying on the ground crying. The grass was stained with blood. Some were holding their legs, some were hugging their arms, and some had blood dripping from their faces. Vladimir came back to his senses and stood up from the ground. He turned around and looked at the Wuxia Imperial base. It was also a mess. However, the equipment on their side had been packed up early and had just been moved away from the edge of the giant circular pit, so there wasn't much damage. However, the number of people injured seemed to be about the same. A few Wuxia scientists were crying in their arms. No one knew where they were injured. Vladimir closed his eyes and thought quickly in his mind. What was going on? Could it be another test from the headquarters? It was too much like those people's handiwork. Crazy, stubborn, and unscrupulous. In order to achieve their goals, they would do anything. No one knew how they transported the explosives here and buried them at the edge of the circular pit. He could even determine the model of the explosive. It should be the KM-137 series that was specially used by the KGB for targeted killing. Vladimir got up from the ground with a dark face and said to Peter, "Take some people down and get Lena up." Then he said to the driver, "You wait here and provide them with the necessary assistance. Give me whatever you want. If anyone dares to refuse, kill him." Vladimir's eyes were red, completely disregarding any discipline or rules. At this time, as long as he could save Lena, he would even consider killing everyone here. The middle-aged driver saluted. "As you command, Lieutenant General Vladimir." It was rare for the driver to be so serious. Vladimir patted him on the shoulder. "I'll leave it to you." He then walked towards the Russian scientists who were supposed to be under his protection. He brought the military doctor to check on their injuries, bandage them, and guard them. After confirming that the Russian scientists were not dead or seriously injured, Vladimir didn't care anymore. He ordered one of his subordinates to watch the scientists. He returned to the edge of the giant pit and looked nervously at the rescue at the bottom of the pit with the middle-aged driver. Gunyenji covered Song Jinning's body with her own. She was afraid that the explosives would explode on Song Jinning. When the explosion sounded, Hua Xiaoheng was packing up the equipment with a group of entourage. When he heard the loud noise, he instinctively turned around and looked at the spot where Song Jinning and Gunyenji had been standing. He saw the two of them lying on the ground. Before he could rush over, the security personnel he had arranged had already surrounded the Wuxia Imperial scientists. They used their bodies to create a wall and shield of flesh and blood. Gunyenji helped Song Jinning up slowly and looked at the crowd surrounding them in panic. A field agent said calmly, "Don't be afraid. We'll protect you." Gunyenji nodded and said gratefully, "Thank you. Where's Major General Hua?" At a time like this, she still had to see Hua Xiaoheng to feel at ease. The field agent didn't answer Gunyenji's question directly. He only said, "Our duty is to protect your safety. Don't worry. If anyone wants to harm you, they'll have to step over our corpses. Gu Nianji tried her best to suppress the excitement and nervousness in her heart and nodded. Thank you. Hua Xiaoheng tore off the disguise on his face in the chaotic crowd and returned to his original appearance. He strode to where Gu Nianji and Song Jining were standing and said to the field agents surrounding them, "Thank you. You've done a good job. Now go and see if there are any explosives that haven't been detonated, and call the doctors over to check if the scientists are injured." The explosion just now had been too sudden, and it was shockingly powerful. It wasn't something that the toy-like, electric sparks from last time could compare to. To put it bluntly, the last time was a child's scare game, but this time, it was a real battlefield of flesh and blood. These field agents received new orders and missions and began to investigate and explore their own base. Hua Xiaoheng glanced at Gu Nianji and patted her on the shoulder. He didn't say anything else, then looked at Song Jining. "Are you okay?" Song Jining was used to all of this. When she had been doing experiments with her father, Song Haichuan, she had encountered this kind of thing more often, so she had long been used to it. She stroked her hair and shook her head. "I'm fine. I'm going to check my equipment. As long as the equipment is intact, I'm fine." She left Gu Nianji and took the two researchers to check the equipment and the data on it. Gu Nianji looked at Song Jining's back with emotion and said in a low voice, "Miss Song is really a scientist worthy of everyone's respect. She was a genius scientist who had truly put life and death aside and devoted herself to scientific research." Hua Xiaoheng nodded and smiled. "That's why I'm very proud of my mother." He had understood his mother since he was a teenager, so when his mother was busy with experiments and neglected his birthday, he wasn't unhappy, nor did he make a fuss. He just took the birthday cake and took the bus to Song Jining's laboratory alone to eat a piece of cake with his mother. Growing up like this, he didn't blame anyone, nor did he develop an antisocial personality because of his unfortunate childhood. Gu Nianji was deeply attracted to him because of this. She didn't remember anything before she was 12 years old, but she knew that there was a period of time in her memory that was completely dark. In the 7 years that Gu Nianji had grown up, Hua Xiaoheng had been like sunlight, shining into her dark life. She had grown up in the darkness, but Hua Xiaoheng had nurtured her into the light. Gu Nianji gently held Hua Xiaoheng's hand and looked at him fondly. She whispered, "I'm also very proud of Miss Song, but I'm even more proud of you." Hua Xiaoheng looked at her with a smile and leaned down to whisper in her ear. "What a coincidence, I wanted to say the same thing. I'm even more proud of you." Gu Nianji's heart suddenly shrank. His deep and magnetic voice had the magic of a subwoofer, drilling directly into her heart from her ears. She blushed and her heart raced, unable to control herself. However, in public, where an explosion had just occurred, she couldn't show any excessive behavior. She could only hold Hua Xiaoheng's hand tightly. Wherever Hua Xiaoheng went, she followed him like an accessory on his leg. Hua Xiaoheng was also worried about Gu Nianji, so he let her follow him. The two of them walked around the Huaxia Empire's base and confirmed that all the scientists and entourage were alive. Some were injured, but no one was seriously injured or dead. Hua Xiaoheng breathed a sigh of relief. He ordered his men to be more vigilant as he walked towards the Russian scientists' base. The situation there was much worse than theirs. First of all, there were destroyed instruments everywhere and parts were rolling all over the ground. Gu Nianji accidentally stepped on metal pieces several times and almost sprained her ankle. In the end, Hua Xiaoheng had no choice but to hold her waist to prevent her from falling. The Russian scientists' injuries were also more serious than the Huaxia Empire's. Several of them had their arms hanging and they seemed to have broken bones. However, there were no deaths or serious injuries. Hua Xiaoheng looked around but didn't see Vladimir. He found someone and asked, "Where's Lieutenant General Vladimir?" A KGB agent pointed to the edge of the giant circular pit. "Over there." Hua Xiaoheng took a look and froze. "What are they doing?" Comrade Major Lena fell into the pit in order to save Lieutenant General Vladimir. The KGB agent muttered, his eyes turning red. Gu Nianji didn't understand Russian, so she looked at Hua Xiaoheng inquiringly. Hua Xiaoheng frowned and led her to Vladimir's side as he said, "Major Lena fell into that giant circular pit in order to save Vladimir." Gu Nianji let out a loud, "Ah," and was shocked and angry. How could this be? Are they still testing her? Gu Nianji knew that the last electric spark was because the KGB headquarters wanted to test Major Lena's loyalty. In the end, it backfired and almost injured Gu Nianji and Song Jining. Hua Xiaoheng's expression darkened. When they arrived at the edge of the giant circular pit, Vladimir lay on the ground in a daze. He held his binoculars and looked into the bottomless pit. Gunyenji saw that the middle-aged driver was also helping, so she quickly walked over and said, "Uncle Ivan, did Major Lena really fall in?" The middle-aged driver nodded painfully. "Of course it's true. I saw it with my own eyes. The explosion was right at the boss's feet. Lena pushed the boss away, slipped and fell in." This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1281, I'm Prouder of You. They were so amazing. The monthly tickets had already exceeded 600. The monthly tickets were 600 plus updates at 1 p.m., and the third update was at 8 p.m. If there were 900 monthly tickets tomorrow, it would still be the third update. Mwah. Chapter 1292. Gunyenji was shaken to her core after listening to the driver's brief recount. In the nick of time, Lena had pushed Vladimir away, but she had fallen into the huge pit herself. She walked over and stuck her head out to look at the huge circular pit. The bottom of the pit was blue, and the surface of the water reflected the sunlight. She couldn't see the bottom and there seemed to be mist lingering around it. Gunyenji only looked at it for a while before looking away. She asked with lingering fear, "How deep is this place?" She then asked, "Does Major Lena know how to swim?" It was said that there was plenty of water at the bottom of the pit. If she had fallen into the water and knew how to swim, there should have been a chance of survival, right? Gunyenji was thinking about how to comfort Vladimir when she saw a few people climb up from the bottom of the pit. They were all drenched and they were still dripping water when they got up. The last person to come up was Lieutenant Colonel Peter. Gunyenji remembered this person who always had drooping eyelids as if he never got enough sleep. This person gave her a very sinister feeling. Gunyenji's gaze usually didn't stop on this person. She would avoid him whenever she could and wouldn't look at him at all. However, seeing that he was willing to risk his life to save Lena this time, Gunyenji's impression of him improved a lot. When Vladimir saw Peter and the others come up, he quickly walked over to them and asked excitedly and anxiously, "You're all up. Where's Lena?" Peter took the towel from his subordinate and wiped his head. He said calmly and regretfully, "I'm sorry, Lieutenant General Vladimir. This is all we found." As he spoke, Peter opened the black plastic bags in their hands. Gunyenji followed his gaze. It turned out that the plastic bags contained torn clothes, Lena's KGB uniform. When Vladimir saw it, it was as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over his head. He glared at Peter and opened his mouth. He wanted to speak, but his throat couldn't make a sound. It was like a nightmare while he was sleeping. He wished that it was just a nightmare. When he woke up, the nightmare wouldn't exist anymore. However, the middle-aged driver came over and interrupted Vladimir's last thought. You only found clothes? They're all coats. Poor Major Lena. She must have rolled all the way down the pit, then fainted and fell into the water." The middle-aged driver didn't finish his words, but everyone present knew what he meant. If someone fainted fell into the water, they would definitely die. Peter patted Vladimir on the shoulder. "Boss, my condolences. We searched a lot of places down there. We searched all the places that we could walk through, and we crawled over the places that we couldn't walk through. We only saw traces of someone rolling into the water. The bottom of this huge pit leads to an underground river. If Major Lena had really fainted when she fell into the water, it would have been a disaster." Pyotr spoke fluent Russian with a slight accent, like someone from Eastern Europe who spoke Russian. Gunyenji didn't understand Russian and wasn't wearing a Bluetooth headset that could translate at the same time. She had no choice but to ask the driver for help again. The middle-aged driver related to her in English. Gunyenji gasped when she heard this. "They mean that Major Lena has sacrificed herself?" The middle-aged driver nodded. "That should be the case." He put his hands in his sleeves and sighed. Pyotr's eyelids drooped and he stood in front of Vladimir with his head lowered. After a while, he took out another black plastic bag and said, "This was also found down there." Vladimir opened the black plastic bag with trembling hands and found a phone with a broken screen, a men's watch and a wallet inside. These were all things that Lena had always carried with her. "Boss, my condolences." The other KGB agents who had followed Pyotr down to look for Lena also comforted Vladimir. "Lieutenant Colonel Pyotr took us down to look at many places. He even wanted to break open the cracks in the rocks to take a look, but other than these things we didn't find Major Lena." Vladimir closed his eyes and held back the tears that were about to burst out of his eyes. He gritted his teeth and said, "I don't care. I want to keep looking. I want to see her if she's alive and I want to see her corpse if she's dead." Pyotr nodded. "Okay, let's keep looking." He tied the long rope that he had just untied around his waist and was about to go down again. The middle-aged driver grabbed him and turned to Vladimir. Boss, I know you're very sad about Major Lena, but Pyotr is also your subordinate. You can't be so harsh on Pyotr for Lena's sake, can you? Vladimir glared at the middle-aged driver and rushed over to untie the long rope from Pyotr's waist. He tied it around his waist and said, "You guys don't have to go. I'll go myself." This time his movements were too fast. Pyotr and the middle-aged driver didn't manage to hold him back. They watched helplessly as he jumped down. Pyotr was worried, so he found another long rope and went down with a few people. The long rope was tied around his waist and swung around in the deep valley of the huge pit. It went all the way down to the bottom. Gunyenji wanted to poke her head out to take a look, but Hua Xiaoheng pulled her back. "Don't stand on the edge of the cliff." Wasn't this like a cliff? Gunyenji was even more worried. Hua Xiaoheng put his arm around her shoulder and stood next to the middle-aged driver. After a moment of silence he said, "Our experiment here is over. We have to go first. Let us know if you guys find Lena." Gunyenji made a call gesture to the middle-aged driver and said, "Uncle Ivan can also send me a WeChat message or QQ. I'll keep them on me." The middle-aged driver nodded. "You guys go first. The boss isn't done with his madness. I don't think he'll let it go so easily." Gunyenji looked at the middle-aged driver disapprovingly and whispered, "Don't say that. Vladimir is so pitiful this time." The middle-aged driver laughed bitterly. "I know, but we have to accept reality, don't we? Fortunately, they haven't started yet. They just have a good impression of each other, so they should forget about each other soon." Gunyenji shook her head and said solemnly, "No, I won't forget Lena. I won't forget Vladimir, and I won't forget Uncle Ivan." Gunyenji walked over and gently hugged the middle-aged driver. The middle-aged driver patted her on the back and kissed her face like an elder treating a junior. "I won't be seeing you off. Have a safe trip." Gunyenji nodded heavily. "You take care too." She followed Hua Xiaoheng back to the Wuxia Empire base and watched as everyone packed their things. Not long after, they paid the bill from the resort villa and drove out of the Tunguska region of Siberia in a rented car. They sped all the way to the nearest and largest airport, Irkutsk International Airport. A special plane from the Wuxia Empire was already waiting for them there. Hua Xiaoheng had to coordinate with someone to get out of seclusion, so Gunyenji followed Song Jining and the other scientists onto the plane. The captain and all the flight attendants stood at the cabin door to welcome them and even gave Song Jining a bouquet of flowers. "Welcome back, Miss Song." Song Jining was very surprised. She had come to Siberia by train and had never experienced such a high standard of treatment. Gunyenji guessed that Hua Xiaoheng had arranged it. She smiled and held Song Jining's arm. "We've benefited from Miss Song." The captain was also very respectful to Gunyenji. He stepped aside and invited Gunyenji and Song Jining to board the plane first. After everyone was settled, Hua Xiaoheng quickly returned to the plane. He went to the cockpit to discuss the route with the captain and the deputy. After contacting the domestic airport, he ordered them to take off immediately. The flight from Irkutsk Airport to the Wuxia Empire's imperial capital International Airport wasn't long. It only took 3 hours. Because they were on a private plane, they had the green light the entire way. Other planes gave way to their private plane, so it only took them an hour and a half to get to the imperial capital International Airport. When the plane landed at Terminal T3 of the Imperial Capital International Airport, Gunyenji couldn't believe her eyes. This was too fast. However, Hua Xiaoheng and the Special Operations Forces moved very quickly. As soon as the private plane landed at Terminal T3, several buses drove directly to the tarmac. Gunyenji was even more surprised. She looked at Song Jining. "Miss Song, is that your car?" Song Jining glanced at it and smiled. "How could we afford such a car? Those are all military vehicles." "Oh, that's Major General Hua's car." Gunyenji looked into the cabin and didn't see Hua Xiaoheng. She asked the person next to her and found out that Hua Xiaoheng had already gone down. Gunyenji moved closer to the window and finally saw Hua Xiaoheng's tall and straight figure. He stood in front of a bus and spoke to the bus driver. He then waved his hand, and boxes half the height of a person were carried down from the plane and directly onto the bus. Gunyenji understood. "So they're transporting the equipment for you, Miss Song?" Song Jining also looked at it and nodded with a smile. "These are the boxes we're talking about. These equipment are priceless now. The data inside is unique and there's no other. Therefore, they needed a military vehicle to escort them to ensure absolute safety. The Russian scientists' equipment had been destroyed in the explosion just now, so she didn't know if they had any backups." Gunyenji's thoughts ran wild. When she saw Hua Xiaoheng walking towards their private plane with his long legs, She quickly retracted her head from the window and smiled at Song Jining. 5 clapped her hands and said emotionally, "We're finally home." This was the second update of the day. The monthly ticket was 600 plus updates. Chapter 1282, Never Forget. It was the third update at 8 p.m. If there were 900 monthly tickets tomorrow, it would still be the third update. Mwah. Chapter 1293. Song Jining adjusted Gun Yenji's clothes with a smile and said, "Go back and rest well. You've lost weight these past few days." "Have I?" Gun Yenji touched her face and was a little embarrassed. "You need to rest when you go back. Thank you for your hard work. It's not hard to do what I like." Song Jining stood up with a smile and planned to get off the plane. Hua Xiaoheng returned to the plane and walked over to Gun Yenji and Song Jining. He said calmly, "We're here. We can get off now." Song Jining picked up her backpack and waved at him with a smile. "I'll get going first. You and Yenji can discuss the wedding. Let me know if you need anything. Although I'm not a rich man, I still have money for my son's wedding." Hua Xiaoheng smiled and was obviously much more relaxed. "Aren't you going to help us pick a good day?" Song Jining winked at Gun Yenji. "I'm not good at picking a day. You guys decide. Anyway, I'll just wait to hold my little grandson and granddaughter." Gun Yenji. Hua Xiaoheng didn't reply. He stepped aside and watched Song Jining get off first. He then reached out to Gun Yenji. Gun Yenji held his hand, put on her sunglasses and got off the plane with him. Although they took a private plane back this time, it seemed to be a secret the entire time. There was no welcome ceremony at the airport, and no one came to pick them up. The two of them got into the car that the Special Operations Forces had sent to pick them up. They quietly left the T3 terminal of the Imperial Capital International Airport and headed to the Special Operations Forces headquarters. When Gun Yenji got into the car, the person sitting in the front row turned around and said with a smile, "Yenji, your engagement is earth-shattering. You're good. I've really underestimated you." It was actually Yin Shixiang. Gun Yenji instantly felt exceptionally close. The sense of alienation she had felt when the plane had arrived at the station immediately disappeared. She smiled and reached out her hand. She said playfully, "Brother Xiong, I'm getting engaged. You should be the one giving me an engagement present." "Where's my present?" "I'll give you a slap." Yin Shixiang slapped Gun Yenji's soft, fair palm. "Is that enough?" "Enough." "How stingy. I'm going to tell Chi-Chi that her fiancé is such a stingy person." Gun Yenji purposely said angrily. Yin Shixiang chuckled and said proudly, "Why don't you tell her? Chi-Chi will definitely tell you that I'm living a frugal life." It seemed that the relationship between the two of them was very good. Lovers finally found a way to be together. At the thought of Vladimir and Lena, Gun Yenji couldn't help but sigh. She nodded and didn't continue to ask. She only said, "Then when do you plan to hold the wedding?" Ma Chi-Chi and Yin Shixiang's engagement was before theirs, so their wedding should also be before theirs. She didn't want to overtake them. Yin Shixiang pouted at Hua Xiaoheng and said, "Hua Xiao, has my marriage application been approved?" If they didn't agree to his marriage application, how could he get married? Hua Xiaoheng rubbed his forehead and replied tiredly, "Yes, soon." Gun Yenji. Yin Shixiang was in a good mood when he saw that there was finally hope. He winked at Gun Yenji and said, "See, when I hold my wedding isn't up to me or Chi-Chi, it's up to Major General Hua." Smooth talker. Gun Yenji snorted and stopped teasing Yin Shixiang. Hua Xiaoheng and Yin Shixiang began to discuss work matters. Gun Yenji picked up her phone and sent He Jichu a text message. "Nianzi is here, Professor He, I'm back. Are you feeling better?" He Jichu had an acute illness at home a while ago, and Gun Yenji had asked Chen Lai to take him to the hospital. He Jichu had been recuperating at Chen Lai's place for the past few days. After Gun Yenji confirmed that his life was not in danger, she didn't disturb him. He Jichu had already returned to his villa in the imperial capital. He used to live in the professor's suite provided by the school in the imperial capital. After deciding to live in the imperial capital for a long time, he bought a detached villa near the west hills of the imperial capital. It occupied a large area, and there was a 500-meter path from the main door to the main house. There were no other houses around, so it was very quiet. He sat alone in front of the computer working. When he heard the sound of a message coming in on his phone, he took it to see that it was Gun Yenji. He quickly dialed the number. "Yenji, you've arrived in the imperial capital?" He Jichu's cold voice sounded from the phone, but Gun Yenji thought it was exceptionally pleasant. She smiled and nodded. "Yes, I just got off the plane. Are you feeling better? Are you still in the hospital?" He Jichu smiled and leaned back in the ergonomic computer chair. He said leisurely, much better? I won't die. Gu Nianji smiled and quickly said, don't say that. Health is the most important thing. You can't just treat the symptoms but also the root cause. Otherwise, what if it flares up again in the future? It won't happen again. He Jichu smiled half-heartedly because there was nothing in this world that could continue to provoke him. His heart was as calm as still water. He could practically cosplay a monk in a kasaya. That's good. You've just recovered from a serious illness, so you need to take good care of yourself. I brought you a little gift. When are you free? I want to visit you? Yes, I'm free anytime. Hijichu smiled. Hearing Gu Nianji's sweet and soft voice, Hijichu suddenly felt that the scenery outside the window suddenly looked better. His study faced the forest on the hill in the backyard. He had always thought that the lush greenery was too messy. Now, however, he felt relaxed and happy. Even his eyes felt much better. Gu Nianji's curvy lips curved into a very happy smile. She curled up in the back seat of the car and muttered, that won't do. I'll visit you again when you're feeling better and I'm not busy with work. Speaking of work, Hijichu reminded Gu Nianji, are you considered an official member of the Senate? Gu Nianji replied, Her wild thoughts were suddenly pulled back to reality. She scratched her head. Yes, I guess so. Actually, the official process hadn't been completed yet. She should still be in the probation period. Hijichu reminded her calmly, if you officially join the Senate, I'll help you quit your job at the American law firm. Gu Nianji definitely couldn't serve in the Senate and also work abroad. Okay, I should indeed quit, Gu Nianji said without hesitation, although she still felt a little reluctant. She actually didn't have that high of an ambition. She was very satisfied to be a successful lawyer. However, Speaker Long valued her so much, so she couldn't not appreciate his kindness. Moreover, she also wanted to be able to help Hua Xiaoheng, so she accepted the position in the Senate. Since they were talking about the work of the law firm, Gu Nianji couldn't help but think of suing Luo Jialan. She had just returned to China, so she still had a lot to do, but for Luo Jialan, it should be the most important thing. This was the third watch of the day, Chapter 1283, Preparing to Sue. If there were 900 monthly votes tomorrow, it would still be the third watch. Good night, sweethearts. Chapter 1294. When she was in Russia, Song Jining had entrusted Gu Nianji with full authority to be her lawyer and file a lawsuit against Luo Jialan. As for what charges Song Jining and Luo Jialan could use to sue, there was a lot of room for maneuver. This would depend on the skills of the lawyer. Gu Nianji narrowed her eyes and gripped her phone. She wanted to discuss this issue with Hijichu. However, she was in the bulletproof car of the Special Operations Forces, so it wasn't convenient for her to discuss legal issues with Hijichu. Professor He, you should rest. I'll see you tomorrow. Gu Nianji planned to go back and organize her thoughts, then discuss a plan with Hijichu the next day. Hijichu heard something different in Gu Nianji's tone. Hijichu's shimmering, sultry eyes flashed as he looked at his watch. I'm free all day today. Where are you? Do you want me to hold a welcoming dinner for you? Gu Nianji's eyes lit up. You've really recovered? You can work now. As soon as Hijichu heard Gu Nianji's excited tone, he concluded that Gu Nianji had something to talk to him about. Hijichu smiled faintly and said, you can ask Chenlai if I've recovered from my illness. After a pause, Hijichu continued, I'm not at school right now. I'm at the West Mountain Villa. I just bought a house. You haven't been here yet. How about this, since you're back in China, I've just gotten my hands on a new house. I'll open a house. Warming, let's invite our friends to gather for a party. Gu Nianji laughed and said, okay. What? Hijichu laughed. So anxious? By the way, Smith's lawsuit against the Angel in the World Foundation in Japan is about to come out. It should be tomorrow. We'll have them come to us. Dinner and house. Warming, let's have a party together. Gu Nianji was overjoyed. She raised her fist and waved it in the air. She was so happy that she almost jumped up. Really? The results will be out tomorrow? That's great. My luck has been good recently, so good that I can't believe it myself. Hua Xiaoheng and Yin Shixiang both looked up at her. Gu Nianji quickly stopped smiling and coughed. Yes, there are two good news. Which one do you want to hear first? Yin Shixiang sneered. Isn't it just an engagement and marriage? What other good news do you have? Gu Nianji, all right, there are 4 happy events. Which one do you want to hear first? Gu Nianji couldn't help but smile. Her inky black eyes sparkled, and her joy was almost overflowing. Yin Shixiang was stunned. Is there something else besides your engagement and marriage? Then we'll have to listen carefully, right, Huashao? Huashaoheng looked at her and nodded. Okay, go ahead. Gun Yinji couldn't suppress the smile on her face. She said happily, First, Professor, he bought a new villa and invited me to a house party. Warming party? How is this a happy occasion? Yinji, you must be kidding me. Yin Shixiang cursed silently and quickly glanced at Huashaoheng. But his expression didn't change. He was calm and unperturbed as he said, What about the second item? Gun Yinji smiled and said, The lawsuit I entrusted to an American law firm in Japan will be officially concluded tomorrow. Took more than 3 months. It wasn't easy. You're going to win the lawsuit. Yin Shixiang finally felt that it was interesting and asked excitedly, Our little Yinji is going to become a little rich woman. There's no such thing as a little rich woman. All the money has been squandered by Gu Yanran and that foundation. Gun Yinji shrugged. I'm more concerned about whether my father's things can be returned intact. Huashaoheng nodded and said, This is indeed a joyous occasion. When do you plan to take over your property? I don't have time recently, so I can only entrust someone else to do it for me. Gun Yinji spread her hands regretfully and said, My lawyer should help me count it and be in charge of supervising the execution of the court's decision. This kind of transnational property lawsuit was actually very difficult to fight. Many years ago, there was once a person from the Huaxia Empire who owned a large amount of real estate in Tokyo, Japan. However, that was during the war years. After that person returned home, the real estate was illegally occupied by the locals. After the war, the person's widow went to Japan to fight a transnational lawsuit to get back her husband's inheritance. In the end, the Japanese Supreme Court ignored the facts and awarded the property to the locals who illegally occupied it. Basically, it was very difficult for foreigners to win when they fought for property with their own people. This time, Gun Yinji had used a team of lawyers from the largest American law firm as her lawyer at Hijichu's suggestion. That way the Japanese court wouldn't dare to act rashly. No matter what, the Japanese son was most willing to listen to the American father. Even if Gun Yinji went to fight this lawsuit herself, it wouldn't be as effective as Smith and the others. This had nothing to do with one's own quality and talent. It only had to do with the national conditions of the country involved. Some countries would respect the spirit of legal contracts and be able to ensure that no matter which country's nationality, they would be treated equally by the law. But some countries wouldn't do that, such as Japan. Anyway, for the Japanese, if they did something wrong and judged the wrong case, it was just a matter of bowing and apologizing. If one bow didn't work, then 2 bows. As for pursuing responsibility after the fact, that didn't exist. If you wanted them to commit seppuku, unless you helped them do it, it wouldn't happen. Gun Yinji returned to Huashaoheng's official residence at the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces in an extremely excited mood. The first thing she did when she got back was to take a good shower in the bathroom. Then, she applied a facial mask on herself before turning on her laptop and starting to draft legal documents related to Luo Jialan. Although Song Jining had given her full authority, Gun Yinji only knew a little about what had happened back then when she had been in a lawsuit with Baijini. That was far from enough to convince the Public Prosecution Office to officially prosecute Luo Jialan. She also needed to collect information and evidence. However, she wasn't worried about that. Huashaoheng had the intention to clear his mother's name, so he should have left a lot of evidence in his hands. Gun Yinji could just look for him directly. After staying in her room for an hour, Gun Yinji washed off her facial mask, changed into her usual hoodie and came downstairs. Yin Shixiang was sitting on the big sofa in the living room on the first floor. His laptop was on the coffee table in front of him and he was typing quickly. Gun Yinji looked around but didn't see Huashaoheng. She asked casually, Brother Xiong, where's Major General Hua? Yin Shixiang said without looking up, Major General Hua went to a meeting. What's the matter? He's going to a meeting as soon as he gets back. Doesn't he rest? Gun Yinji's heart ached a little. She sat on the sofa opposite Yin Shixiang and rested her chin on her hands. She asked curiously, Aren't you going with him? I'll stay here and listen to Major General Hua's wife's orders. Yin Shixiang closed his laptop with a snap and winked at Gun Yinji with a smile. Gun Yinji's cheeks flushed and she glared at Yin Shixiang. Go. Does Chichi know what you're saying, Brother Xiong? Tisk. Why would Chichi blame me if I told the truth? Yin Shixiang stretched his long legs and hugged his neck with his hands. He leaned against the sofa and said with emotion, You and Major General Hua, Chichi and I have all been together for a long time. Only little Zhe. Gun Yinji thought of Zhao Liangzi and Bai Shuang, and the happiness in her heart gradually faded. Where's Brother Zhe? Where is he? Gun Yinji stood up. I brought him a gift too. He went back to work, Yin Shixiang said lightly. I don't think he'll be back anytime soon. If he came back he would be reminded of the past. Gun Yinji understood what Yin Shixiang meant and sighed slightly. I hope Brother Zhe can get over it as soon as possible. Yin Shixiang sneered and pointed his finger at Gun Yinji. You only know how to talk from the sidelines. If it were you, would you be able to get over it? No, Gun Yinji said without hesitation. Yin Shixiang was stunned. After a while, Yin Shixiang scratched his head and said with a sheepish smile, I was just joking. You're smarter than Bai Shuang and you don't have a father like Bai Shuang. You definitely won't be like Bai Shuang. Gun Yinji pursed her lips. She thought that it wasn't that she was different from Bai Shuang, but that Hua Xiaoheng was different from Zhao Liangzi. If she had the same status as Bai Shuang and Hua Xiaoheng wanted to be with her, no one would be able to stop him. As for Zhao Liangzi, by the time he realized his own feelings, it was already too late. This was probably what it meant by character is destiny. Everyone could only walk the path set by their own character. Gun Yinji's eyes flashed and she changed the topic. I have something to ask Major General Hua. I don't know when he'll be free. Can you ask him for me? Gun Yinji knew that she couldn't contact Hua Xiaoheng when he was in a meeting. Only Yin Shixiang could. Yin Shixiang nodded. I'll call you when I'm free. Are you in a hurry? Not particularly. Gun Yinji thought about it. It's fine as long as I have a chance to see Major General Hua tomorrow. That should be no problem. You guys have gained too much from your trip to Siberia. Major General Hua has no choice but to hold a meeting immediately to summarize and report. Otherwise, if you miss the opportunity, you'll be punished by military law. Yin Shixiang said half-truthfully, his fingers tapping back and forth on the armrest of the sofa as if he was playing the piano. I know I didn't mean anything by it. Gun Yinji quickly said, I can also ask Miss Song if Major General Hua is too busy. Yin Shixiang thought that Gun Yinji was going to discuss the wedding with Hua Xiaoheng and Song Jining, so he quickly advised her. Not only do you have to explain this to Miss Song, but you also have to have a good talk with General Hua and Grandfather Hua. They're all Major General Hua's elders, so they'll all be living under the same roof in the future. They'll see each other all the time. Do you understand what I mean? Gun Yinji actually didn't understand because she hadn't considered the wedding at all. To her, announcing the engagement was already a big step. As for entering the marriage hall, she had to at least deal with Luo Jialan first. Otherwise, this woman could still appear around them as a relative to disgust her. She couldn't stand it. She wasn't getting married to be bullied and she didn't want to compromise. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1284, 4 Blessings. The monthly ticket was 900 plus updates at 1 p.m., and the third update was at 8 p.m. It looked like the frequency of the 3 updates had to be maintained. Everyone. Especially the relatives who voted for the monthly ticket, they kissed each and every one of them. *3***. Chapter 1295. Gun Yinji spread her hands and giggled. I don't need to understand. I'm marrying Major General Hua. If he can't handle his family, why would he marry me? Brother Xiong, would you let your family mistreat Chi-Chi? How is that possible? My parents love her like she's their own daughter. As their son, I'm behind. Yin Shixiang said without hesitation and chuckled. He only found a girlfriend when he was almost 30, then got engaged and prepared to get married. His parents were so grateful to Ma Chi-Chi, how could they put on airs and make things difficult for her? It's the same logic. Gun Yinji tilted her head and looked at Yin Shixiang. Miss Song also loves me like her own daughter. Although Miss Song wasn't a loving mother in the usual sense, Gun Yinji wasn't an obedient daughter in the usual sense either. Both of them had their own career pursuits, so they were very compatible. But General Hua and Grandfather Hua are prejudiced against you. Yin Shixiang was very realistic when it came to other people's matters. You can't expect Major General Hua to always be at home to help you settle your family relations, right? Gun Yinji thought about it and smiled. I don't think I have any family relations to settle. Grandfather Hua is getting old. I plan to ask the Xie family to find something for him to do so he doesn't have to make things difficult for Major General Hua every day. General Hua doesn't need to be mentioned. If he makes things difficult for me, I think General Ji won't let him off. The Xie family was Grandfather Hua's in-laws. The Xie family didn't know that Grandfather Hua had wronged his wife before, but now that they knew, it would be unreasonable for them not to support their own people. Yin Shixiang raised an eyebrow and gave her a thumbs up. Good. You know how to use others to your advantage. As expected of our genius girl. Actually, it's my time that's precious. Do you know how much those famous lawyers charge for an hour? If you want to fight with me, think about your own wallet first. Gu Nianji smiled proudly and tossed her black hair behind her back. She went back to her room. She didn't go downstairs much and had been nervously researching information in her room to prepare a complaint. When she went downstairs for dinner that night, she found that Yin Shixiang wasn't there either. Of course, Hua Xiaoheng wasn't back either. It was boring to eat alone, so she hurriedly made a bowl of pork rib soup and ate it before going upstairs to continue working. When she went to bed in the middle of the night, Hua Xiaoheng still hadn't returned. At that moment, Hua Xiaoheng was in the small conference room of the Army's Supreme Council, reporting to a few higher-ups. During his trip to Russia, he had obtained a lot of first-hand information. General Ji silently listened to him and asked with a frown, "Did Director Song make any new discoveries in Tunguska?" Another big shot from the General Assembly Department was also very concerned. This military experiment has been going on for almost 20 years. We hope that Director Song can produce results. I heard that the United States has made a major breakthrough. We can't fall too far behind. Hua Xiaoheng looked at the information in his hand and said, "According to Director Song's report, she made a major breakthrough in the Sea of Japan at the supernatural workmanship of nature. This time she had gained a lot from her trip to Tunguska in Siberia. After she finishes analyzing all the data, we should be able to enter the field test phase." As soon as he said that, all the big shots in the room were overjoyed and overjoyed. It should be known that these people were usually as calm as a mountain in front of their families. It was very rare for them to show their emotions without reservation like this. General Ji said emotionally, "It's been 20 years. In a few months it'll be 20 years. I hope that Director Song can surpass her master this time and successfully complete the field test." If they really succeeded, not only would they be able to leave the United States in the dust, but they would also be able to lead the entire blue planet. They would be unrivaled in the entire world. Of course, the big shots in the military were the most excited about this. If Speaker Long had seen this scene, he would definitely have scolded these old military leaders for being militaristic and wasting money and manpower. However, he was just saying it. His obsession with national security was even deeper than some of the big shots in the military. It was just that the way he expressed it was different. It was already 1 o'clock in the morning when Hua Xiaoheng finished sorting out all the information and making the report. The big shots of the military were still in high spirits. When they walked out of the conference room, they were all in high spirits as if they were 10 years younger. General Ji was the last to come out. He said to Hua Xiaoheng, "Is the Russian president really going to be a witness to your wedding?" "Yes, President Putin really wants to attend our wedding." However, Hua Xiaoheng hesitated. "We don't plan to hold a wedding in the near future." He hadn't discussed this with Gu Nianji yet, but he could tell that Gu Nianji didn't really want to hold a wedding right away. Because of Zhao Liangzi, even Yin Shixiang planned to wait a year before getting married. Hua Xiaoheng also planned to wait a year and a half before holding a wedding. General Ji was very satisfied with the time and said, "President Putin is coming to us, so we need plenty of time to prepare. I think a year and a half is a good time. Let's do it this way. In a year and a half, Nianji will be almost 21 years old." Hua Xiaoheng pursed his lips. "Yes, soon." After returning from the military compound to the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces, Hua Xiaoheng went to the office building and worked there all night. Gu Nianji didn't wait for Hua Xiaoheng to return. When she woke up the next morning, she looked at her phone. It was exactly 7 in the morning. Her biological clock had actually adjusted back quickly. Since Hua Xiaoheng was so busy, Gu Nianji didn't plan to continue idling there. She called He Jichu and found out that he was at home today. After asking for the address, Gu Nianji asked for a car key from Hua Xiaoheng's orderly and drove out in a military jeep. Gu Nianji was now engaged to Hua Xiaoheng, so she could use Hua Xiaoheng's car. Moreover, as a woman she felt more secure driving a military car. She could feel it when she was on the highway. Almost all the cars avoided her like the plague. Gu Nianji curled her lips. She didn't race but drove at the speed limit. It was already 10 o'clock in the morning when she arrived at He Jichu's West Mountain Villa. Gu Nianji got out of the car and looked at the greenery and birds chirping in the empty mountains. She felt relaxed and happy. She pushed her sunglasses up on her head, got out of the car, and carefully looked at the villa in front of her. The house was very unique. It had a gray roof and a polonium main building. She could see a wooden ribbed lamp hanging under the eaves in front of the door. There was also a thin golden wire bird cage. There were 2 rattan reclining chairs on the cloister under the bird cage. It was so leisurely that it almost blended in with the mountains. The courtyard was very large and spacious. From the courtyard entrance to the main villa, there was a wooden cloister. There were 2 roads beside the cloister. One was a driveway and the other was a small path made of sheep intestines and stones. The main villa was at the end of the intersection of the 2 paths and the cloister. It was like 100 rivers returning to the sea, all roads leading to the same destination. Gunyenji was amazed by the big house. He was really too rich. Not only was he rich but he also had good taste. However, Hijichu couldn't be living alone in such a big house, could he? Gunyenji thought about it as she rang the doorbell. Hijichu, who had a graceful figure, rode a bicycle with yellow frames and black wheels. He soon appeared at the luxurious and imposing cherry wood entrance of the villa. He was wearing an ivory-white Egyptian cotton shirt with a small collar, and a gray cashmere vest with a polo logo on the outside. He was wearing gray fine wool trousers with straight seams. There was a sense of seriousness in his leisurely manner. His gold-rimmed glasses made him look even more refined and sophisticated. When he arrived at the entrance of the courtyard, Hijichu put one foot on the ground and reached out to press the automatic button by the door. The courtyard door slowly opened. He could have opened the courtyard door remotely from the main house, but he had to ride a bicycle over. Gunyenji smiled as she looked at the bicycle he was riding and whistled. "TSK Professor He, you're breaking the rules by showing off your wealth? A Lamborghini bicycle. The money of a bicycle is enough to buy a mid-range car, right?" This was the second update of the day. The monthly ticket was 900 plus updates. Chapter 1285, Time is Precious. It was the third update at 8 o'clock in the evening. Mwah everyone. Chapter 1296. Hijichu smiled and ignored Gunyenji's teasing. He pointed to the other side of the driveway and asked her to drive the car in. Gunyenji nodded and returned to the car. She started the car and drove into the courtyard of Hijichu's West Mountain Villa. Gunyenji parked the car at the end of the driveway and got out of the car to enter Hijichu's newly bought villa. The first floor hall also had cherry wood floors, and the center of the hall was covered with a colorful Persian carpet that contrasted sharply with the snow-white sofas. The hall was very deep, and the spiral staircase wound up to the second and third floors. There was also a floor below that could be walked. Out's basement. Gunyenji took a rough look and clicked her tongue. "Professor He, why does your villa look so familiar? It seems to be on par with your big American-style country house in Boston." They were both top-notch locations, and the villas of the same size were almost the same expensive unit price. Hijichu poured Gunyenji a glass of milk and handed it to her. He looked at her carefully. "You've lost weight. Didn't Hua Xiaoheng feed you enough in Russia?" Gunyenji took the milk with a smile. "Of course I'm full. Isn't it good to lose weight? Professor He, I'll take that as a compliment." Hijichu. Gunyenji looked at Hijichu again and said sincerely, "Professor He, you're the one who's really lost weight. What exactly caused the relapse this time? Will it continue to relapse?" Hijichu shook his head and said firmly, "No, it was an accident this time." "Okay, I hope you'll get good treatment if you're sick. You can't hide your illness for fear of treatment." Gunyenji looked at Hijichu deeply and handed him the gift she had bought. "Professor He, this is a small gift I bought for you in Russia. I know you don't lack anything and I can't afford anything too expensive. I think this set of dolls is very cute, so I bought it for you." Gunyenji smiled and opened the gift box. Inside the box was a very famous gift in Russia, a Russian nesting doll. Gunyenji picked up the pink, round-faced, big-eyed wooden doll in traditional Russian clothing and compared it to her own face. "Her name is Matryoshka. Isn't she cute?" Other than the shape of his face, the doll's facial features were quite similar to Gunyenji's. It was just that the shape of the full moon was similar to the doll that Gunyenji had been holding since she was a child. It was also similar to Wen Shiyi's face. Hijichu's rippling, almond-shaped eyes flickered as he silently watched Gunyenji take out a smaller nesting doll from the belly of the first one. She took out new nesting dolls from the previous nesting doll's belly one after another. Finally, a total of 15 nesting dolls of all sizes were placed on the coffee table in front of Hijichu. The largest was the size of Hijichu's palm, and the smallest was only the size of a pinky finger. The workmanship was exquisite, the color delicate, and the expression interesting. It was very cute. Hijichu was no stranger to this. He used to have many at home and they were even more exquisite and luxurious. However, this was a gift from Gunyenji, so the meaning was different. Hijichu picked up the largest nesting doll and looked at it. He said coldly, "If this doll's face was a little smaller and narrower, it would look a little like you. Do I look like that? I don't think so. Gu Nianji blinked, but the doll looked familiar to her, so she bought it. Could there really be a psychological reason? Gu Nianji didn't have time to think about it. Hijichu had already put the nesting dolls back one by one. He said calmly, "If you don't think so, then you don't look like me. Maybe I saw wrong." Gu Nianji laughed and didn't argue with Hijichu. She finished her milk and got back to business. "Professor He, I'm relieved to see that you've recovered." Gu Nianji took out the draft of the indictment she had written last night. "You're so busy, I shouldn't have disturbed you. But I hope to discuss this matter with you to broaden my thinking." Hijichu knew that Gu Nianji wouldn't come to him for no reason. He accepted the folder from Gu Nianji without any surprise and opened it to take a look. After reading it quickly, Hijichu muttered, "You want to be Song Jinning's lawyer and sue Luo Jialan for attempted murder?" Gu Nianji nodded heavily and said seriously, "Yes, I must sue her for attempted murder. But based on your statement, wouldn't it be easier to sue her for mental abuse, or domestic violence?" Hijichu said calmly. He was looking at Gu Nianji's indictment from a purely legal perspective. Gu Nianji was a little excited. "Yes, I want to sue her for attempted murder. How can just suing her for abuse be enough? It had to be attempted murder." "What?" Hijichu looked up and looked at Gu Nianji calmly. "Convince me first. There's no murder in our country's criminal law. There's only intentional murder, which is divided into completed and attempted murder. Miss Song didn't die, so it can only be attempted murder. I think this is the maximum legal punishment for Luo Jialan's actions. It's many times more serious than domestic violence and mental abuse." Gu Nianji was filled with righteous indignation, and her little face was tense. Hijichu smiled and said casually, "What's the use of telling me this? You don't have a single word to prove why you want to sue Luo Jialan for attempted murder. You've been saying that this is the only way to punish Luo Jialan to the maximum. This will make the police and prosecutors think that you're trying to vent your personal anger on attempted murder. If you can't even convince me, how can you convince the prosecutors to file a public prosecution against Luo Jialan? If it's mental abuse or domestic violence, you don't need to file a public prosecution through the police and prosecutors. You can file a private prosecution in court and sue Luo Jialan. But if you want to sue the police for attempted murder, you have to convince the police to file a case. At the same time, you have to obtain enough evidence to convince them that it's indeed attempted murder. Only then can you file a public prosecution against Luo Jialan in court. Because according to Wuxia law, a case like attempted murder can only be prosecuted by the prosecutors. You can't go to court to file a lawsuit yourself." Gu Nianji understood all of what Hijichu had said. This was also why she had first thought of Hijichu and wanted to discuss the case with him. Gu Nianji let out a sigh and leaned back on the sofa. She let out a long sigh and said, "I know, so I want to discuss it with you to see if I can prove that Luo Jialan did indeed attempt to commit murder." "That won't be easy." Hijichu handed her folder back. "Do you still remember what the professor taught you in criminal law class? If you want to prove intentional murder, what evidence and arguments do you need?" Gu Nianji counted with her fingers. "First, we need to determine that she had a subjective motive for intentional murder. Second, we need to prove that she had the objective conditions to commit intentional murder. Third, we need to prove that she had committed intentional murder, and that she knew that the direct result of this action would be the death of the plaintiff. Each of these would not be easy to prove for what Luo Jialan had done to Song Jinning in the past." Hijichu nodded and said expressionlessly, "First, we need to prove that she had a subjective motive for intentional murder of Song Jinning. How do you think we can prove it?" Gu Nianji was speechless. "Also, why are you suing Luo Jialan? It's a thankless task. Tell me, do you have any reason to sue her?" Hijichu could tell at a glance that Gu Nianji must have a reason, so he asked. This was the third watch of the day, chapter 1286. Why everyone? The next third watch will be 1,200 monthly votes. Good luck everyone. Chapter 1297. Was there a reason to sue Luo Jialan for intentional homicide? Of course there was. But how could she tell Hijichu this reason? He was her master's tutor in law, a person who was very serious about his profession. If he knew her deeper reason, would he despise her? Would he be very disappointed in her? Gu Nianji didn't dare to speak. Hijichu's shimmering almond-shaped eyes were devoid of any emotion. He calmly watched the change in Gu Nianji's expression, and his heart sunk. It seemed that this girl didn't want to tell him the truth. Hijichu actually didn't have any special requirements for Gunyenji. She could not love him or even respect him, but she couldn't lie to him. That was his bottom line. Hijichu hated being lied to the most. However, Gunyenji kept her mouth shut like a small clamshell. Her eyes flickered, and she wished she could sew her mouth shut with a needle. Hijichu lowered his eyes, crossed his legs, and picked up his teacup. He lifted the lid of the teacup and took a sip of the Longjing tea that was as expensive as gold. The sweet fragrance of the tea flowed between his lips and teeth, and Hijichu's mood completely calmed down. Hijichu was actually very familiar with Gunyenji's personality. She had never changed since she was young. This little girl was born to be soft but not soft. He could only go along with her. He couldn't goad her, and of course he couldn't scold her until she was black and blue. That would only arouse her rebellious mentality and make her completely uncooperative. Hijichu's eyes darted around, and he had an idea in his mind. He put down the iced jade porcelain teacup that was painted with ink landscapes and found a breakthrough point. He asked leisurely, "By the way, isn't her name Huo Jialan? Why is it Luo Jialan now?" Gunyenji composed herself. She could tell him the reason. Because her mother's surname is Luo, and she's not the biological daughter of the Huo family's uncle, so she moved out of the Huo family's household registration and changed her surname. Hijichu immediately grasped the key point. Since she changed her surname and moved out of the Huo family's household registration, legally speaking, she has nothing to do with the Huo family. Even if you marry Huo Xiaoheng in the future and become the young madam of the Huo family, Luo Jialan won't affect you in any way. Why do you still want to sue her? The corners of Gunyenji's mouth twitched uncontrollably. She hadn't expected that Hijichu would be able to uncover the truth of the matter with just one sentence from her. Gunyenji was a little flustered and quickly said, "She only changed her surname. Although she moved out of the Huo family's household registration, she didn't move away. She still stayed with the Huo family and took care of grandfather Huo." Hijichu looked at her intently. "You're saying that she changed her surname and moved out of the Huo family's household registration on the surface, right?" Gunyenji, it was over. The more she said, the more mistakes she made. Was it too late to shut up now? Gunyenji's large eyes blinked, and her long eyelashes fluttered like 2 rows of small fans. In Hijichu's eyes, this was clearly a guilty conscience. Hijichu averted his gaze and looked out the window at the beautiful lush scenery of the West Mountains in early summer. He calmly continued his reasoning. Why did Luo Jialan change her surname and household registration, but still continue to live in the Huo family? If she's not doing it for the sake of it, then she has other motives. Gunyenji's pupils constricted in an instant, and the light in her eyes gathered into an astonishingly bright spot. Hijichu happened to turn his head, and his gaze swept across Gunyenji's face. He didn't miss the change in her expression. After some thought, Hijichu felt that he might have understood. Then she must have other motives. She changed her surname and moved out of the household registration to obtain greater benefits. Hijichu wouldn't think that Luo Jialan had suddenly found her conscience and was too embarrassed to continue being a member of the Huo family. So what benefit was better than the fact that her surname was Huo and she was the only daughter of the Huo family's eldest uncle? All the smoke bombs and smoke screens were no longer effective. Hijichu looked at Gunyenji quietly and understood why she had to sue Luo Jialan for the felony of intentional homicide, instead of domestic violence or mental abuse. Because Luo Jialan had touched Gunyenji's sore spot, and everyone around Gunyenji probably knew that it was Huo Xiaoheng. Hijichu's voice became even colder. Did she want to marry Huo Xiaoheng? So she changed her surname and moved out of the Huo family's household registration to advance by retreating, right? Gunyenji clenched her fists and became excited. Yes, you're right. Luo Jialan changed her surname and moved out of the household registration just to use grandfather Huo's position as an elder to forcefully marry Major General Huo. As she said this, the grievance in her heart also rose. Gunyenji's eyes were red, and she held back her tears as she turned her head away. I've worked so hard, done so many things and achieved so many results, but in grandfather Huo and General Huo's hearts, I'm still not as good as Luo Jialan, who has lived with them for many years. They would rather Luo Jialan marry Major General Huo than accept me. Why do they still look down on me? This kind of inferiority, hidden in the depths of her heart, seemed to only be able to vent it in front of Hijichu without any scruples. In front of Huo Xiaoheng, in front of Song Jining, in front of Yin Shixiang, and even in front of Ma Qiqi, Gunyenji had a "I don't care at all" look on her face. Although she knew very well that this kind of inferiority was actually unreasonable, she was only 19 years old. It was the age where she was very sensitive to the opinions of outsiders, but she pretended not to care. It was inevitable that her emotions would go back and forth. Hijichu looked at her fixedly. After a while he got up and walked to the sofa opposite him. He sat down beside Gunyenji. He hesitated with one hand, but in the end he placed it on Gunyenji's shoulder. With the other hand he took a tissue from the coffee table and wiped Gunyenji's tears. Hijichu didn't try to persuade her. He just sat beside her and waited for her to cry enough before saying coldly, "Then do you still want to marry Hua Xiaohim? If you don't, I can propose to you right away." Gunyenji. She raised her head and looked at Hijichu in shock. She shouted in a low voice, "Professor He, now is not the time to make such a joke." If he said something similar again, Gunyenji was sure she would immediately run away. Hijichu curled the corners of his lips and smiled faintly. "Are you feeling better? What's that saying again? The man you choose, you will marry him even if you cry. That's how you are right now." Gunyenji finally laughed. There were still tears in her eyes, but her smile was already rippling through the tears. "Professor He, you also read this kind of joke on the internet?" Gunyenji wiped away her tears with a tissue. She still felt uncomfortable. "Professor He, can I use your bathroom to wash my face?" Hijichu nodded and said nonchalantly, "There are 2 bathrooms on the first floor, and each guest room and master bedroom has a bathroom on the second floor. There's a bathroom in the game room on the 3rd floor. Which one do you want to use?" Gunyenji was speechless. This person was addicted to showing off his wealth. Gunyenji stood up expressionlessly. "I'll go to the nearest bathroom." She went to the bathroom on the 1st floor near the living room. She pushed the door open and went in. The place was decorated very elegantly. On the white marble washstand was a long neck and thin waist peacock blue vase with an orchid stuck diagonally in it. There were small mahogany brackets propped up on the wall. On them were facial cleansers, toothbrushes, toothpaste, face cream and hand cream. Gunyenji immediately noticed that the facial cleanser, toothbrush, toothpaste, face cream and hand cream were all brands she was used to using. The unfamiliarity she had felt earlier instantly disappeared. This place made her feel warm and comfortable, like she had returned to her own home. Gunyenji calmed down and carefully washed her face. She put on a simple layer of face cream before coming out. She was still young, so her fair cheeks were full of collagen and didn't need any makeup. They were naturally beautiful. Hijichu was still sitting in the same position as before. He hadn't even moved his posture. He supported his head with one hand and rested the other on the back of the sofa. He waved at Gunyenji. "Come and sit." Gunyenji sat down on the other end of the sofa. "It's not a big deal. It's worth crying over." Hijichu scolded her lightly. "If you want to cry in the future, come here and cry. If you cry in front of outsiders and embarrass me, I'll break your legs." Although his words were harsh, his tone was doting and intimate. It was as natural and sincere as a big brother to a little sister. Gunyenji liked this feeling of being like family very much. She quietly sat closer to Hijichu and muttered, "Professor He, I won't do it again. I won't cry again." "Do you believe that yourself?" Hijichu sneered and pointed at the box of tissues on the coffee table that Gunyenji had used halfway. "I don't believe it myself." Gunyenji smiled through her tears and tilted her head. "But why doesn't Professor He believe it? A leopard can't change its spots. You've been a crybaby since you were young. How could I not know you?" Hijichu said casually, then shut his mouth. Gunyenji quickly moved another step and sat next to Hijichu. She quietly tugged at the corner of his shirt. "Professor He, you know about my childhood, right? Can you tell me about it?" Hijichu looked away uncomfortably and firmly pushed Gunyenji's hand away. He calmly changed the topic. "I've forgotten all about it. Let's talk about Luo Jialan's case. I don't object to you charging her with intentional homicide, but do you have any concrete evidence?" Intentional homicide was a criminal felony. It required a detailed chain of evidence, sufficient subjective conditions and rigorous logical support. All 3 were indispensable. The chain of evidence included witnesses and physical evidence. This was also the most important condition for a successful case to be filed for intentional homicide. Gunyenji forcibly pulled her thoughts back from her lost childhood and focused her attention on Luo Jialan's case. She was no longer smiling mischievously, nor was she sentimental. Her entire aura had suddenly changed. She was sharp, magnanimous, calm and intelligent. She was like a famous sword that was being sharpened. The 3 feet of frost concealed its sharpness. She was just waiting for the moment when the sharp sword was unsheathed and illuminated the sky. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1287, Gu Nianji's Reverse Scale. Today was tentatively scheduled for 2 updates. The second update would be at 8 o'clock in the evening. If the monthly ticket for the evening reached 1,200, the third update would be sent after the second update. P.S. Thank you to Shi Irma for the 10,000 Qidian coins yesterday. Mwah. Chapter 1298. Gu Nianji carefully recalled the first time she came to the Huo residence in the military compound at the end of the year before last. At that time Luo Jialan was still called Huo Jialan. She was the good daughter of the Huo family and a good housekeeper. Song Jining had been insane for more than a decade, and the Huo family's grandmother had passed away. Huo Guanchen hadn't found another wife, and grandfather Huo's head nurse Zhang Feng had an ambiguous identity. Therefore she was the only woman in charge of the Huo family. Song Jining was completely taken care of by her 2 housekeepers Auntie Xing and Auntie Yu. Gu Nianji frowned slightly and said, "After Miss Song's condition was exposed, Luo Jialan wailed, pointed at Miss Song and shouted at me. She said, 'I won't let you take her. You're not allowed to take that slut away. Do you know that my mother committed suicide by swallowing sleeping pills because of her? What right did she have to pretend to be crazy after doing all those shameless things? Wasn't she crazy? Did he lose his memory? I'll make her crazy for a lifetime. Amnesia for a lifetime. Apologize to my mother.'" Can these words be used as her subjective motive for intentional murder? Gu Nianji continued, "At that time, there were also 2 housekeepers who took care of Miss Song, Auntie Xing and Auntie Yu. These 2 must know more about the truth." He Jichu's expression didn't change as he pointed out professionally, "Just based on this sentence alone, it's intentional injury, at most, not intentional homicide." Gu Nianji raised an eyebrow. The difference between intentional injury and intentional homicide is still in the defendant's subjective consciousness. If she knew that her actions would cause the other party to lose his life, she would have killed him on purpose. If she knew that her actions would only cause the other party a certain amount of harm, then it would be intentional harm. We just need to prove that her actions will kill Miss Song and not just hurt her. Well, that's a good starting point, but how can you prove that the direct result of her actions was Miss Song's death? After all, Miss Song did not die. She had been ill for more than 10 years and was cured. Ijichu's words are always so logical and to the point. Gu Nianji was greatly inspired to discuss the case with a senior professional like Hijichu. Following this train of thought, she continued, "The direct result of Luo Jialan's actions will cause Miss Song's death, but whether Miss Song is really dead or not is different. Just because Miss Song is not dead, we can't completely rule out her motive and possibility of intentional homicide." Ijichu smiled and nodded. "That's interesting. Continue." "I will collect information to prove that Luo Jialan's care for Miss Song all these years was not to help her recover, but to kill her with a soft knife. Her real purpose was to kill her." Gu Nianji still remembered the cramped and low bedroom on the top floor of the Huo Manor. Song Jining had lived in that kind of oppressive environment for more than a decade. For a woman whose brain had suffered serious physical trauma and stimulation, and whose mind had completely collapsed, this environment was definitely one disaster after another. It was impossible for it to be really for her psychological treatment. Ijichu took out his phone and made a few notes on the memo. He asked, "Okay, even if the motive is established, what about the physical evidence and witnesses?" "I'll ask Major General Hua for the physical evidence. The most important witnesses are Auntie Xing and Auntie Yu. They've been taking care of Miss Song for many years. Yes, Auntie Xing and Auntie Yu are the key. If we use them well, they'll be very important witnesses. However, if we don't use them well and there's a lack of physical evidence, your accusation won't be established." Hijichu checked the gaps in Gu Nianji's thoughts and quickly came up with a complete plan for her. If they followed this procedure, there would at least be no problem with the police and prosecutors. They could successfully file a case and file a public prosecution. You have to be careful. The prosecutor in this kind of case is the prosecution. You have to follow the legal procedures very strictly and not let Hua Xiaoheng interfere. Once he makes a move, I believe that Luo Jialan's lawyer won't let this go. He'll attack you for abusing your power for personal gain, and using your power to bully others. Hua Xiaoheng was in a high position of power, and the victim was his biological mother. If he said something, the prosecutors wouldn't ignore it. It was even possible that they would immediately file a case for prosecution. But in the modern internet society where the wind blows without wind, such an approach was too stupid. If the other party seized on their weakness and used it to incite the negative emotions of netizens to cause trouble, they would become unreasonable even if they were in the right. Therefore Hua Xiaoheng had to stay out of the matter. Other than providing Gu Nianji with the evidence in his hands, he couldn't interfere in anything else. Gu Nianji thought about it carefully and smiled. She said, "We won't do anything against the law, but I won't pretend that Major General Hua has nothing to do with this just to avoid suspicion. After all, she was his mother. If he really stayed out of the matter, those people would also attack him for being inhumane. If they want to start a cyber war against me, the cyber children will teach them a lesson." He Jichu looked at Gu Nianji's sly and fearless expression, and his emotions were very complicated. He wanted to see Gu Nianji in high spirits and moving forward bravely, but she was like this because of another man. He Jichu felt very upset. The two of them discussed for the whole morning. He Jichu looked at his watch and said, "Are you hungry? I'll go cook?" Gu Nianji was surprised. "Professor, he knows how to cook? Didn't he always order takeout and drink red wine?" He Jichu, "It's just cooking. How hard can it be?" He had secretly read a lot of tutorials online and had wanted to try it for a long time. He Jichu's expression was a little ugly. He stood up from the sofa. "Wait here." He strode to the kitchen on the first floor. How could Gu Nianji just wait here? She had to admire He Jichu's cooking. Gu Nianji smiled and stood up to follow He Jichu to the kitchen. She walked backwards beside He Jichu and carefully observed his expression. She asked with a smile, "What does Professor He want to cook?" "Egg fried rice." He Jichu didn't even look at Gu Nianji and said, "Don't follow me. How am I going to cook if you come in?" His shimmering almond-shaped eyes glared at Gu Nianji and stopped her outside the kitchen. Gu Nianji saw that He Jichu insisted on not letting her enter the kitchen, so she thought about it and didn't insist. She stopped at the kitchen door and turned around. "Then I won't go in. Good luck, Professor He." He Jichu, Gu Nianji returned to the living room and sat down. She took out her phone to look at the workflow He Jichu had prepared for her. She had to admit that He Jichu's plan was very rigorous and complemented her own plan very well. She was so focused on her work in the living room that she forgot the time. When her stomach began to growl, Gu Nianji turned to look at her watch. It was amazing. It had been almost an hour and a half since He Jichu had entered the kitchen. What kind of egg fried rice took an hour and a half to cook? Was it a luxurious Manchu Han imperial feast with egg fried rice? Gu Nianji couldn't suppress her curiosity. She put it away and tiptoed to the kitchen door to peep. Just then the ear-piercing alarm of the smoke detector rang throughout the entire villa. Beep, beep, beep. It was as if police cars and ambulances with sirens on the streets had all rushed to the villa. Gu Nianji felt like her ears were about to go deaf. She panicked and quickly ran to the kitchen. Before she reached the door, she was shocked by the thick smoke coming from the kitchen. "Professor He? Professor He?" Gu Nianji rushed into the thick smoke and saw He Jichu holding a spatula and wearing a gray apron. He stood in front of the induction cooker in a hurry. Gu Nianji dragged him away and hurriedly glanced into the pot. What were those black blobs? What happened to the egg fried rice? This was the second update of the day, Chapter 1288, The Crisis Caused by a Meal of Egg Fried Rice. Dear friends, it will be midnight tomorrow. Good night, dear friends. Chapter 1299. Before Gu Nianji could ask for more details, the automatic sprinkler system connected to the smoke alarm sprang to life. Splash. Water sprayed out like a waterfall from the sprinklers installed on the roof, drenching Gu Nianji and He Jichu like drowned rats. The kitchen, which had been exquisite and beautiful just a moment ago, instantly became the scene of a raining fire. The automatic sprinkler system quickly dispersed the thick smoke in the kitchen. The water gradually subsided, and He Jichu protected Gu Nianji as they rushed out of the kitchen. The two of them looked at each other at the kitchen door, then burst out laughing in unison. He Jichu's smile was still very restrained, but the corners of his lips curled up, and his cold expression softened slightly. Gu Nianji, on the other hand, laughed without restraint. She clutched her stomach and couldn't even stand properly. He Jichu couldn't take it anymore when she laughed like that. He grabbed her arm and scolded her in a low voice. "What are you laughing at? Hurry up and go wash and change your clothes. Take a look at yourself." He Jichu finished speaking and looked away uncomfortably. Gu Nianji's laughter stopped abruptly. She looked down and saw that the light pink silk blend cardigan she was wearing today was already soaked and stuck to her body, outlining the curves of her breasts. She quickly covered her chest with her hands and ran to the bathroom with her head down. Hijichu rubbed his forehead and called out to her, "Go to the guest room opposite the master bedroom on the second floor. It's prepared for you. There are clothes for you to change into." Gunyenji stopped in her tracks. She couldn't just wear it like that, so she turned and ran up the spiral staircase to the second floor. The long hallway on the second floor was quiet and serene. There was a window at the end of the hallway, and a lamp hung in the hexagonal window. The paper lampshade in the shape of a full moon hung in the air, giving off a sense of isolation. Gunyenji glanced at the lampshade and casually opened the door opposite the master bedroom. The room was very large and also a small suite. There was a small living room and living room outside, and a small entryway on the right. A paper door blocked the other end of the entryway. Gunyenji opened the paper door and found the bedroom inside. Thank goodness this wasn't the little pink princess room. The decoration of the room was simple but elegant. It was mainly beige with light yellow accents. On the bed, there was a blanket with a yellow duck embroidered on it. The blanket didn't look big, but Gunyenji found it unexpectedly familiar. But she didn't have time to think and rushed into the bathroom in the bedroom. The toiletries inside were also brands she was used to using, including the snow-white towel on the cabinet. It was also made of Egyptian cotton flannel, which was very soft and absorbent. She undressed, turned on the water and took a quick shower. Wrapped in a towel, she came out and carefully examined the bedroom again. The tall four-poster bed was neatly laid out with beige striped sheets. There was a big soft pillow on the bed and two light yellow pillows embroidered with little yellow ducks. Gunyenji walked over like she was possessed and touched the little yellow duck embroidered on the pillow. This little yellow duck wasn't much different from the little yellow ducks sold in the market, but its eyes were especially big, which made it look especially lively. She picked up the blanket with the little yellow duck embroidered on it and looked at it. The blanket was soft to the touch and should have been woven from the finest fine cashmere. It was very difficult to embroider on this kind of blanket, and the cashmere flying silk of the blanket would be damaged if one wasn't careful. But this little yellow duck was very skillfully embroidered. The stitches were dense, and it was obvious that it had many years of embroidery skills. But it was a waste to use such excellent embroidery skills to embroider a simple and unassuming little yellow duck that didn't have any special features. Gunyenji cursed silently, but she couldn't help hugging the blanket and rubbing it on her face. It was like the blanket that a child would hug when they were young. Gunyenji reluctantly put down the blanket and walked into the bedroom's closet to pick out clothes to wear. She could tell that Hijichu had really put a lot of thought into decorating the room here. The four walls were filled with log wardrobes and shoe racks with clothes and shoes for spring, summer, and autumn. There was also a long wardrobe in the middle of the closet that was half the height of a person. Opening the drawers of the wardrobe, she saw underwear, scarves, belts, and other private clothes and accessories. There was also a drawer with a lock that Gunyenji didn't touch. Blushing, she took out a set of underwear and went to the summer wardrobe to pick out the simplest set of black t-shirts and light blue skinny jeans. Her legs were long and the jeans only reached a little above her ankles. So she picked out a pair of Isabelle Marant shoes. That was the brand she was used to. Xiaoheng bought her casual shoes from this brand most of the time. When she finished packing and came down the stairs, she found that Hijichu had already changed and was standing at the bottom of the stairs. This was the brand she was used to. Xiaoheng bought her casual shoes from this brand most of the time. There were people coming and going in the room. Gunyenji raised a brow. When she came earlier, she didn't see anyone else here. Hearing someone coming downstairs, Hijichu turned around to look. His shimmering almond-shaped eyes flashed slightly, but he quickly frowned and said dryly, "Is it suitable?" "It's okay." Gunyenji walked down. "It's just that the pants are a little short." Hijichu was speechless. "Don't you wear this size?" Hijichu remembered the size of Gunyenji's clothes. "I used to, but now I've grown taller." Gunyenji stretched out her long legs and kicked in the air. Hijichu was speechless. "What are you so proud of?" Hijichu looked away and crossed his arms. He said coldly, "What's the use of growing taller? Go cook if you can." Gunyenji was speechless. This was an unspeakable weight in their lives. Hijichu didn't know how to cook and coincidentally neither did Gunyenji. Their talents didn't seem to light up the skill of cooking. Gunyenji laughed. "Professor He, we're both incompetent cooks. Why do we have to hurt each other? Come, it's my treat. What does Professor He want to eat? As long as it's not the Manchuhan Imperial Feast, I can afford it." The Manchuhan Imperial Feast only costs 40,000 to 50,000 renminbi. You can't afford it? Hijichu glanced at her. "Leave your watch there. You can eat dozens of meals." Gunyenji covered her watch and shook her head. That won't do. This is my priceless treasure. Even if I don't have food to eat, I won't pawn it. Are you stupid? You don't even have food to eat. What's a watch? Hijichu rubbed her head. You didn't blow dry your hair? It's getting hot. It'll dry in a while. I've already rubbed it until it's half dry. Gunyenji pointed at the people coming and going between the kitchen and the living room. Are you here to clean up the kitchen? Yes, the kitchen needs to be renovated. Hijichu said without changing his expression. That was the scene of his failure. He needed to destroy the evidence and not let others see it. Gunyenji instantly understood Hijichu's intentions. She laughed to herself and twirled the car keys in her hand. Professor He, take my car. Let's go down the mountain to eat, okay? If she hadn't come today, she would bet 10 renminbi that Hijichu would have gone to bed after drinking red wine. Hijichu walked a few steps forward. Then you'll drive me back? Of course. I'll pay for everything. Professor He, you can just sit back and enjoy the fruits of my labor today. Gunyenji giggled as she walked to the door. They went to the garage to get the car. Gunyenji and Hijichu drove down the mountain to eat. They didn't go far. The West Mountain Villa District's facilities were very complete. The people who lived here were either rich or respectable. There were restaurants, shopping, fitness, and other entertainment facilities. Hijichu pointed the way and said, let's go to that Lahuda restaurant. It's a Cantonese restaurant. The seafood is very authentic. Gunyenji, who was hungry, felt like she was about to drool when she heard this. Then we must try it later. Why didn't you tell us earlier that there was such a good place? Do they deliver food? Otherwise we could order takeout. Gunyenji deliberately glanced at Hijichu and sighed. Hijichu looked ahead expressionlessly and said indifferently, eat your food. Stop talking so much. Gunyenji, she smiled as she drove the car into the parking lot and went to the entrance of the Lahuda restaurant with Hijichu. There was a pair of red couplets with black characters on the door. There are great scholars who talk and laugh, and there are no commoners who come and go. Gunyenji, this restaurant was really arrogant. Hijichu's expression was indifferent as he showed his membership card to the uniformed guard. Only then did Gunyenji know that this place adopted a membership system. Only members could come in and eat. Hijichu's membership card was the highest-end platinum card. As soon as he showed his membership card, the restaurant manager immediately came over to personally serve him and Gunyenji. Same old place, Hijichu said indifferently. 2 people. Serve the dishes as soon as possible. The manager's eyes flashed, but he didn't dare to refuse. He smiled and said, come with me. There are a little more people today, so please order first. Actually, Mr. He, why did you come here personally? Just give us a call and we'll send it up for you. Hijichu nodded and his expression relaxed slightly. Next time. Give us the menu and tell the kitchen to hurry up. He could tell that Gunyenji was already very hungry. As soon as she entered the restaurant, her eyes almost glowed when she saw the delicious dishes on the diner's tables. The restaurant manager called the waiter over to help them order and rushed out to make a phone call. He said to the person on the other end of the phone, I'm sorry, Miss Kai. There are no private rooms left today. Would you like to eat in the lobby? I'll leave you the best place in the lobby. It's by the window. I'll get someone to separate it with a screen. It's better than a private room. It's bright and you can also see the scenery outside the window. The person on the other end of the phone seemed to be a little impatient. After discussing with someone for a while, she complained, didn't you say there were private rooms? I have something to discuss with my friend and have already walked to your restaurant's entrance. You said there were no private rooms left. Aren't you messing with me? Miss Kai, I'm not messing with you. I also said that there was only one private room left. That was reserved for our platinum customers. No matter when, as long as he needs it, we have to give it to him. I thought he wouldn't come today, but unfortunately he just brought someone here for dinner and entered the private room, so I'll have to trouble you. The restaurant manager said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Who didn't have a high status and wealth when they came to eat here? Didn't they see what was written on their door? There are great scholars who talk and laugh, and there are no commoners who come and go. In fact, it should be, there are great merchants who talk and laugh, and there are no commoners who come and go. This is today's first update, Chapter 1289, There are great merchants who talk and laugh. Today we'll continue with the third update. At 1 p.m., the monthly ticket will be 1,200 plus updates, and the third update will be at 8 p.m. P.S. Thank you to Lavender Vendor Mimi for becoming the 26th Chief of Hello Major General. Mwah. Thank you to Momo Moshi for your 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Thank you to Only Reading Makes People Happy in Life, for your 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Chapter 1300. Kai Xingnan was in a dilemma at the entrance of Luhuta restaurant. Her expression was very ugly. Luo Jialan, who was dressed in Chanel's new summer fashion, quickly said, "What's wrong? Is there a problem with the private room?" The restaurant manager said that the owner of the private room is here, so we can only eat in the lobby. Kai Xingnan pursed her lips and put away her phone. Why don't we eat somewhere else? Luo Jialan and Kai Xingnan were both members here, but Kai Xingnan's villa was on Xiatangshan in the north, while Luo Jialan's villa was here. The place was not bad. In terms of land price, the villas in the West Mountain were priceless. That was because the houses here could not be bought with money. They were considered super first-rate. On the other hand, Little Tangshan was a medium-sized villa group. It could only be considered as a second-tier villa in the capital. However, Kai Xingnan was different. She had returned from the United States, and the house in the imperial capital had been temporarily purchased by her father, Kai Sumin. Because of the tight schedule, her aunt, Kai Songyin, couldn't find a house to buy in the West Mountain Villa. Moreover, they didn't want to attract attention at that time, so they bought the Xiatangshan Villa, which was more crowded. However, she was still willing to come to Luhuda restaurant to eat and talk. If she didn't live here, it would have been difficult for her to get a membership card. However, at that time her aunt, Kai Songyin, was the prime minister's wife, and her uncle, Tan Dongbang, was the prime minister. Therefore, she used Kai Songyin's connections to get her own membership card at Luhuda restaurant. Of course, it was only the most ordinary level of membership card, not the highest level of platinum membership card. This meant that there might not be a private room for them to eat here. Luo Jialan didn't want to run around. This place was relatively close to her villa and could be reached by walking. She really did not want to drive out again. "It's okay. Why don't we stay in the lobby? Actually, the design of the lobby here is also very unique." Luo Jialan walked in first. The restaurant manager asked two foremen to invite them to two seats by the window. "What do you think of this seat?" Kai Xingnan took a closer look and asked the two foremen, "Which private room did we originally reserve?" The two foremen pointed to a small private room not far away and said, "Right there." "I'm sorry, but the owner of that place is here. We can't just make arrangements." "It's nothing, I'm just asking. I haven't been to this private room before," Kai Xingnan said with a smile, but her eyes were fixed on the door of the private room. Two foremen brought over a screen and placed it next to the small table. Behind them was a huge basin of water dripping guanyin. The water was gurgling and the music was faintly discernible. It was actually very comfortable and it also guaranteed enough privacy. Luo Jialan and Kai Xingnan laughed together. "Here it is." The two nodded to the head waiter. "Give us the menu." While the two of them were ordering, Kai Xingnan's phone rang. She took it and looked at it. It was actually a call from her father, Kai Sumin. At this time, it was midnight in the United States. Why would he call at this time? Kai Xingnan quickly answered the phone. "Daddy, you're still up so late?" Kai Sumin's voice was very hoarse, but he was very energetic. "Xingnan, have you seen the Japanese news?" "No, what? Is there anything worth seeing?" Kai Xingnan looked at the menu while chatting with her father. "You don't pay any attention to the case of the Angel in the World Foundation?" Kai Sumin's face darkened. "Xingnan, although you've returned to the country, you can't abandon your profession. You have to always maintain a strong desire for knowledge in your profession." "Got it, Daddy. Why are you so serious? You should go to bed early. I'll go watch the news." As Kai Xingnan spoke, she searched for the case of the Angel in the World Foundation on the internet and clicked on it. It turned out that today was supposed to be the day the verdict was pronounced. However, the news that the highest judge in charge of the case had suddenly died at home was all over the news that the highest judge in charge of the case had suddenly died at home. Yijichu and Gunyenji sat in the private room of the Luhuda restaurant and chatted. The dishes they ordered were delivered very quickly. 2 steamed lobsters, a plate of steamed grouper, 2 cups of royal bird's nest, salt and pepper shrimp, and steamed ribs with black bean sauce. For the vegetarian dishes, they ordered a stewed bamboo shoots with apricot mushrooms and fresh celery with scallops. Gunyenji ate the steamed lobster first. The lobster meat was fresh, sweet, delicious and juicy. It was no worse than the lobster they had eaten in Cape Town, South Africa. Hijichu smiled faintly as he watched her eat happily. He scooped a small bowl of royal bird's nest from the stew pot and placed it in front of her. Gunyenji didn't even look up as she thanked him. She focused on torturing the lobster. Ijichu had just taken a few bites of the steamed grouper when he felt his phone vibrate. He took it out and saw that it was actually a call from Smith. Smith was his subordinate at the American law firm, and he was also a member of the main law firm representing Gunyenji in the lawsuit in Japan. A call at this time should mean that the results of the case were out. Ijichu curled his lips, his fingers moving slightly as he unlocked his phone. As soon as the call connected, Smith's mournful voice came through. "Mr. He, something happened?" Ijichu stood up and said calmly to Gunyenji, "I have something to do. I'll go out and take a call." Gunyenji nodded. "Professor He, please go ahead." Ijichu quickly walked out of the private room with his phone in hand. Kai Xingnan and Luo Jialan had just finished ordering. Luo Jialan was sitting with her back to Ijichu's private room, while Kai Xingnan was sitting diagonally across from the private room. Ijichu pushed the door open and walked out of the private room. Kai Xingnan saw him at a glance. Wasn't that Ijichu? Kai Xingnan's expression turned cold. Could this private room belong to Ijichu? That couldn't be. In this arrogant restaurant, the people who could reserve a private room were definitely not ordinary people. Not only did they have money, but they also had power. Even her uncle and aunt, who were the former prime minister, couldn't help her father buy a villa in the West Hills. What did Ijichu have to do? Ijichu must have come to eat with a friend. This private room must have been reserved by his friend. She wondered what kind of friends a person like Ijichu would have. Kai Xingnan was eager to win. When Ijichu walked through the corridor and walked towards the entrance of the restaurant, Kai Xingnan quietly stood up. Under the cover of the huge dripping guanyin beside her, Kai Xingnan quietly stood up and quickly walked towards the private room Ijichu had come out of. When she reached the door of the private room, she saw that it wasn't locked. It was just ajar. Kai Xingnan looked in through the crack in the door and saw the silhouette of a young woman with a ponytail. She was wearing a black t-shirt and light blue skinny jeans. Her two slender, straight legs were crossed. She saw the shoes on her feet. It was Isabelle Marant. A pair of simple white flat-heeled shoes was worth at least $3,000. Kai Xingnan's eyes were burning with desire. Her gaze moved up the woman's shoes inch by inch. At that moment, the woman inside suddenly turned her head. Kai Xingnan clearly saw her face. It was actually Gunyenji. This was the second update of the day. The monthly ticket was 1,200 plus updates. Chapter 1290, Looking Down on People. At 8 p.m. the third update. Moi everyone. Chapter 1301. At that moment, Kai Xingnan's face was as dark as her mood, and there was even a moment of ferocity. It was anger, unwillingness, and jealousy that came from having the fruits of her years of hard work taken away. However, her expression quickly calmed down. Although her emotions were still fluctuating, there was nothing unusual on the surface. It seemed that this reserved private room should be He Xiaoheng's. Kai Xingnan made this judgment immediately. That was more like it. Ijichu was indeed powerful in the United States. He was well respected in both the political and military circles, but in Huaxia, as far as Kai Xingnan knew, his hands didn't extend to the political and military circles. The platinum membership card of the Luhuda restaurant couldn't be obtained without a certain level of political status and rank. Therefore, Kai Xingnan thought that Gunyenji had used He Xiaoheng's name to ask for the private room. She was good at abusing her power for personal gain. Kai Xingnan thought about it and couldn't help taking out her phone to secretly take a picture of the private room. At that moment, a hand reached out and took the phone from Kai Xingnan's hand. "Miss, we don't allow photos here. Violators will be fined 100,000 yuan, a man in a security uniform said politely, but his actions were very fast. Kai Xingnan was stunned for a moment, and her face turned red. She immediately whispered, "Thank you for the reminder, I didn't know. I just admired the decoration and furnishings of this private room, and I didn't take any pictures. Can you return my phone to me?" The security guard was very cautious and said, "The photos have to be checked. Show me the photos taken in the past hour to make sure there are no photos of us here." Kai Xingnan took the phone and opened the photo album with a sullen face to show the security guard. She said, "Look, I haven't taken any photos in the past hour." The security guard confirmed that the most recent photo was taken 3 days ago before nodding to her. "Thank you for your cooperation." He bowed to her, turned around and left. Kai Xingnan stared at the security guard's back and cursed him for being a busybody. She was about to turn around and leave when the door of the private room in front of her was pulled open. Gunyenji stood quietly at the door and looked at her with a faint smile. "Isn't this Miss Kai? What are you doing in front of our private room?" Taking pictures? Aha, why are you secretly taking pictures of me? Miss Gu, I haven't congratulated you on your engagement with Major General Hua. The entire world is watching the grand engagement ceremony. You're really lucky. As soon as Kai Xingnan saw Gu Nianji, she immediately suppressed the impatience in her heart and wished her well with a smile. As the saying goes, don't slap a smiling face. Kai Xingnan felt that Gu Nianji would definitely not make things difficult for her since she had lowered herself so much. Unfortunately, she was wrong. To Gu Nianji, the only thing that mattered was whether she wanted to make things difficult for you, not whether she could make things difficult for you. Gu Nianji smiled and looked Kai Xingnan up and down. It had to be said that Kai Xingnan's figure was indeed not bad. She was wearing a smoky gray Issey Miyake business suit that accentuated her curves. She was a little burly, but compared to Americans she could be said to be slim. She was at least a third wider than Gu Nianji, so she looked very impressive blocking the door. Is this how you congratulate me? Gu Nianji looked up at the camera on the top of her private room's door. Secretly filming me from the crack of the door. I've never seen or heard of such a congratulatory mode. Only then did Kai Xingnan realize that there was a camera at the door of the private room. No wonder the security guard had arrived so quickly. It turned out that everything here was being monitored. Kai Xingnan's face alternated between red and white. She had never seen Gu Nianji rebuke her like this before. She had thought that Gu Nianji wouldn't be so disrespectful in public. In the end, she had overestimated Gu Nianji's upbringing and underestimated how shameless she could be. Miss Gu, forgive and forget. If you're so aggressive, you'll only tarnish Major General Hua's reputation. Kai Xingnan seemed to have found the moral high ground, and the indignation in her heart completely calmed down. Besides, you're already going to marry Major General Hua. You won't take it too hard and let others know how you're using Major General Hua's power to do whatever you want outside, right? Kai Xingnan knew that the more powerful a person was, the more they cared about their reputation and were very strict with their family. They wouldn't be like the families of those superficial, low-level bureaucrats who couldn't wait to engrave the words, "My father is Li Gang," on their foreheads. Miss Kai, you're also a well-known figure in the legal world, and you're also a partner of the second-largest law firm in the United States. I really didn't expect you to say something like that. Gu Nianji shook her head, the disdain on her face evident. Kai Xingnan sneered. Miss Gu, I'm really sorry. I've always said different things to different people. To people like you, I can only say things that you understand. As for the legal jargon, do you really understand it? You graduated from B University with a master's degree in law at the age of 19. Don't think I don't know how you got your degree. Kai Xingnan had always thought that she was a genius enough, but compared to Gu Nianji's resume, she was still nothing. She had originally disdained to compare herself to Gu Nianji, but Gu Nianji was actually engaged to Hua Xiaohan. This made her feel unbalanced no matter what. Haha, I don't understand Miss Kai's legal jargon. Gu Nianji emphasized the words, Miss Kai. I only understand legal jargon that everyone agrees with. She was mocking Kai Xingnan for self-created laws. What's the use of having a glib tongue? Kai Xingnan looked at Gu Nianji with almost pity in her eyes. Since we've met here today, I'll remind you in advance. You're already Major General Hua's fiancé. If I were you, I would definitely stop while I'm ahead. Don't be so ruthless towards others. After all, she's already left the Hua family and is no longer a part of the Hua family. She won't affect you anymore. Why must you make things difficult for her? Gu Nianji crossed her arms and her expression turned cold. Miss Kai, who are you speaking for? I don't understand. The matter between me and the Hua family is our family matter. It's not up to an outsider like you to interfere. Who gave you the authority? Who gave you the guts? Ignorance? Or rudeness? Gu Nianji's words completely aroused Kai Xingnan's anger and competitiveness. She had been hesitant to be Luo Jialan's legal representative and was still evaluating it. However, when she saw that Gu Nianji didn't care about friendship at all and didn't know how to compromise or back down, she immediately concluded that Gu Nianji wasn't suitable for Hua Xiaoheng and the others. She didn't know her place after getting engaged. How confident was she in herself? Not to mention just getting engaged, they could even get a divorce after getting married. Kai Xingnan almost laughed out loud at the thought of this. Miss Gu, I really underestimated you in the past. You're so glib with your words. You're like a quarreling auntie in the market. I'm ashamed of my inferiority. Kai Xingnan reached out to stroke her curly hair. What a pity. The courtroom isn't the market. Your skills are destined to be useless. Kai Xingnan knew that Gu Nianji still had some skills, But if she didn't take the opportunity to attack Gunyenji's arrogance and completely infuriate her, when would she? There were cameras here. Kai Xingnan made up her mind to get the surveillance video from here after Gunyenji and the others left. This was the third watch of the day, Chapter 1291, Overrated and Underestimated. P.S. Sorry everyone, daylight saving time has just ended here, so it's an hour later than before. I forgot to set the alarm clock, so I woke up late. I'll be on time tomorrow. Chapter 1302. Looking at Gunyenji's cold expression, Kai Xingnan smiled and thought that perhaps her first shot in the country would be to pull Gunyenji off her high horse. Her attitude became more dignified and amiable, and her voice changed from loud and powerful to gentle and calm like a gentle breeze and drizzle. Miss Gu, I've said everything I need to say. It's fate that we met here today. We're all people who understand the law, so we definitely understand that many things can be settled out of court. There's no need to go to court. How ugly would that be? We're not kindergarten children. Do we have to be so indiscriminate about everything? Don't you think so? Kai Xingnan spoke to Gunyenji in a conciliatory tone. Indeed, lawyers served their clients, and they didn't have to go to court to represent their clients. Settling all kinds of legal disputes for the clients and preventing things from getting out of hand so as to avoid going to court in the end, was the most powerful ability of a lawyer. What do you mean? I don't understand, Gunyenji said calmly. Her tone was flat. It's very simple. Didn't your university professor teach you? Many cases are actually decided before they go to court. Kai Xingnan looked at her with a smile. Not many lawyers win cases by arguing in court. Really? Gunyenji raised an eyebrow. I did just graduate and I haven't fought many cases. But unfortunately, I won all my cases by arguing in court. That's a pity. If you think that way, it only means that you're too childish. Also, Major General Hua protects you too well. Do you understand the principle of leaning against a big tree to enjoy the shade? Do you really think that you won the cases in the past because of your ability? Ah. Kai Xingnan finally showed a disdainful expression and tone, indicating that she looked down on Gunyenji's ability. She still thought that her achievements were either because of Hua Xiaoheng or He Jichu. She wasn't the only one who thought this way, and Gunyenji couldn't be bothered to argue with her. Anyway, everything she said now was useless. When the time came, they would know who was better in court. However, Gunyenji also heard something unusual in Kai Xingnan's words. It seemed like this person was determined to tie Song Jinning's case to Hua Xiaoheng. Therefore, it was exactly as she had predicted. Regardless of whether they had used Hua Xiaoheng's power or not, these people were going to label them as bullies. Unfortunately, it was understandable for others to say that, but Kai Xingnan was in no position to say that. When she slapped someone's face, didn't she look at where she was standing? So that's what Miss Kai thinks. I've learned a lot. Gunyenji wasn't angry at all. She followed Kai Xingnan's logic and asked, so Miss Kai's achievements in the United States were also because of your father's abilities and status. No wonder Miss Kai's legal literacy is so poor that she can even ignore the basic legal facts and lie through her teeth. Did you really go to law school? Or did American law schools lower their admission standards and graduation standards to release unqualified people like you to harm society? You. Kai Xingnan was furious and pointed at Gunyenji. How can you slander me? I've worked so hard for so many years and now you're just going to erase it. Where's your evidence? You're slandering my professional ability and academic achievements, and humiliating my character. If you don't show me the evidence, I'm going to sue you for slander. Same here. Gunyenji didn't back down. She raised her chin slightly and looked at Kai Xingnan coldly. Just now, you slandered my professional ability and academic achievements. In your words, where's the evidence? If you don't show me the evidence, I'm going to sue you for slander. She was using Kai Xingnan's own spear to poke at her own shield. Kai Xingnan's face gradually turned red from the provocation. Her chest rose and fell unsteadily, and even her hands were clenched tightly. Gunyenji provoked her further. You can't show me the evidence? You're the only one allowed to judge others for being unprofessional, and others saying that you're slandering them? Your double standards are really the essence of the United States. You're so good at it. As the two of them stood at the door of the private room arguing, Luo Jialan, who was sitting with her back facing them, finally turned around. She immediately saw Kai Xingnan and a woman standing face to face. They seemed to be talking, and that woman was actually Gunyenji. Luo Jialan's heart tightened. Kai Xingnan hadn't signed an agent contract with her yet. If Gunyenji ruined it, where would she find such a powerful lawyer to represent her? Luo Jialan had experienced Gu Nianji's abilities during Bai Jini's case, so she didn't dare to underestimate her in the slightest. This soft and cute little girl, who wasn't even 20 years old, was like a dog that didn't bark. When she bit someone, it was fatal. Luo Jialan hurriedly got up and came to Kai Xingnan's side. She glanced at Gu Nianji and snorted softly. So Miss Gu is also eating here. Our whole family's reputation is good, isn't it? No wonder you can't bear to let go, even if it will hinder Xiaoheng's future. She pulled Kai Xingnan's arm again. Miss Kai, the dishes are starting to be served. Shall we go back to eat? There's nothing to say to her. Luo Jialan had always acted superior in front of Gu Nianji. From the first time Gu Nianji went to the Huo family's mansion, from the time Luo Jialan was still Huo Jialan, she had never taken Gu Nianji seriously. Gu Nianji was a little orphan girl who did everything she could to get into the Huo family's lap. This impression was deeply ingrained in her. Moreover, because Gu Nianji refused to back down, she didn't even give her the chance to get a marriage certificate with Huo Xiaoheng. She completely shattered Luo Jialan's beautiful dreams and plans, so she hated Gu Nianji to the core. Gu Nianji saw that Luo Jialan had taken the initiative to attack her, so she didn't stand on ceremony. Haha, our Huo family? Miss Luo's surname is Luo, right? What does it have to do with the Huo family? You're the one who's really giving the Huo family face by coming here to eat, right? No wonder you can't bear to let go and even ask to get a marriage certificate with my fiancé. Miss Luo, do you know that a fake marriage is illegal? You were sent by the enemy to ruin my fiancé, weren't you? Gu Nianji could tell that both women had feelings for Huo Xiaoheng, so she couldn't help calling him fiancé in front of them to provoke them. She had to puncture their unrealistic fantasies so that they wouldn't continue to disgust her in the future. Luo Jialan didn't expect Gu Nianji to know about this as well. She was so embarrassed that she almost wanted to find a hole to hide in. She couldn't maintain the arrogant expression on her face, and instinctively retorted, "Nonsense. You were the one who didn't get the approval of the Huo family, so you took it out on me. Aren't you suing me because I'm in your way? Are you worried that you won't be able to marry into the Huo family smoothly?" Kai Xingnan raised an eyebrow and immediately said, "I see. Miss Gu, it's not kind of you to file a lawsuit against Miss Luo for your own personal gain. It's against the rules of a lawyer, isn't it? I can file a complaint against you." Doesn't she know why I filed a lawsuit against Luo Jialan? The corners of Gu Nianji's mouth twitched and she rolled her eyes. Besides, what right do you have to say that about me? Are you Luo Jialan's lawyer, or are you her accomplice? Of course I'm her lawyer. Kai Xingnan blurted out. I'm speaking for my client. Do you have any objections? Luo Jialan was surprised and delighted. She had been thinking about how to convince Kai Xingnan to be her lawyer, and was afraid that Gu Nianji would ruin it. After all, with Kai Xingnan's ability and status, it wouldn't be easy to convince her with money alone. Today she had specially set aside a day to talk to her in detail just for this matter. She didn't expect Kai Xingnan to agree as soon as Gu Nianji spoke. Luo Jialan immediately seized the opportunity. That's right. Lawyer Kai is my lawyer. Miss Gu, what she says is what I say. Okay. Gu Nianji flicked her fingernails as casually as if she was flicking off a speck of dust. Then you'd better pray that Luo Jialan tells you all the facts. You know, if the client hides the truth from you, you won't be able to win the lawsuit. As she spoke, Gu Nianji looked at Luo Jialan, whose eyes were sparkling. Right. Miss Luo, it's useless for you to portray yourself as an innocent white lotus in front of your lawyer. It will mislead her and make her have illusory optimism and abnormal legal judgment. It won't be good for the lawsuit. Luo Jialan's heart skipped a beat, and she instantly had a headache. She couldn't tell Kai Xingnan everything because she didn't trust anyone. It was precisely because Gu Nianji knew what she had done in the past that she concluded that a person who didn't even trust her own mother couldn't be expected to confide in a lawyer. Kai Xingnan laughed. Miss Gu, it seems that you really don't understand me, nor do you understand how the law works. As far as I'm concerned, I don't need my client to tell me the truth about everything. I just need her to tell me if she's innocent or not. As long as she tells me that she's innocent, our lawyer should do the rest. Then she added, otherwise, do you think it's that easy to be a famous lawyer? That's how good and bad lawyers are, not by digging out the truth from their clients. The truth is a matter for the court, and it's up to the judge and jury to decide. We're only responsible for telling the truth on our side. Understood. It turns out that Lawyer Kai's lawsuit is all fabricating facts. Alright, I'll see you in court. I'll see how perfect your fabrications are and if they can withstand my questioning. Gu Nianji didn't want to talk to them anymore, so she turned around and was about to go in. Kai Xingnan looked at the beautiful room and bit her lip. She said unwillingly, "Miss Gu, let me warn you, it's indeed very satisfying to use someone else's privilege to do your own thing. But you have to bear the consequences yourself." Gu Nianji stopped in her tracks and turned around. She frowned slightly and said in confusion, "What did I do to anger the heavens? Why did I make you mention privilege over and over again?" "Still pretending?" Kai Xingnan pouted at the private room. "Didn't you use your privilege to cut in line before us and get this private room?" Gu Nianji was silent. So that was the root of it. The two of them were unhappy that they had used this private room. They had just used a private room to have a meal and they could talk about privilege. How low was the threshold for privilege? Gu Nianji raised her eyes and looked at Kai Xingnan and Luo Jialan. She said lightly, "You need a membership card to eat here. Do both of you have membership cards here?" She wouldn't answer Kai Xingnan's question directly. At this time she could only get more information by faking it. As expected, Kai Xingnan said proudly, "Of course, do you think we're like you? You want to use someone else's privilege to show off here. Miss Luo and I both have membership cards here." Kai Xingnan was Kai Songyin's niece, so Gu Nianji wasn't surprised that she had a membership card here. However, Luo Jialan had a membership card here because of the Hua family's reputation, right? Gu Nianji looked at Luo Jialan and asked with a puzzled expression, "Miss Luo also has a membership card here? Didn't you leave the Hua family? Why didn't you return her membership card?" This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1292, Self-Contradiction. Today was Monday and I forgot the recommendation ticket list. It was still late at night. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it was the first update of 100,000 Qidian coins for the leader of Momo Moshi. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the third update. P.S. Thank you to Helen 3500 Meatball for the 10,000 Qidian coins yesterday. Mwah. Chapter 1303. Luo Jialan looked at Gu Nianji in amusement. "You're so funny. I have a membership card. I applied for it myself. What does it have to do with the Hua family?" As she spoke, she looked at Kai Xingnan. "Miss Kai, do you understand what I'm saying now? Some people just can't bear to let go. They want to join the Hua family no matter what." Gu Nianji curled her lips. "Miss Luo, you applied for it openly? As far as I know, if you didn't get the membership through connections, but applied for it yourself, then you must own a house here. Do you have a villa in the West Mountain?" "That goes without saying." Luo Jialan looked like a virtuous lady and looked Gu Nianji up and down. "Miss Gu, you have to thank Xiaoheng for your status and enjoyment today. If not for our Xiaoheng." "Shut up. You have a villa in the West Hills. Isn't it the Hua family's money? You already have nothing to do with the Hua family, yet you still have the cheek to take their money to buy yourself a house." Gu Nianji was finally forced to break down by Luo Jialan's, "Our Xiaoheng." Her face darkened. "How can you say the name Xiaoheng? What, our Xiaoheng, are you talking about? Wake up. You're no longer related to the Hua family. You're not Uncle Hua's adopted daughter, nor are you a relative of the Hua family. If you keep talking about Hua Xiao like that, I won't be polite anymore." Luo Jialan was even happier when she saw Gu Nianji's change in expression. She laughed hysterically. "Xiaoheng and I grew up under the same roof and we've been on good terms since we were young. I advise you to keep a low profile. Don't think that just because you're engaged, everything will be fine and you can climb up the tree branch to become a phoenix." Luo Jialan humiliated Gu Nianji like this, so Gu Nianji didn't want to give her any more face. After all, face could only be given to those who were willing to accept it. For those who were shameless, even if you gave them face, they would still think that you were a busybody. Gu Nianji crossed her arms and coughed lightly. She deliberately put on a pitiful expression and said lightly, "Miss Luo, delusions are an illness. They have to be treated." "Are you saying I'm sick? Why can't you face reality? Is it hard to admit that you're unwilling to let go because of the Hua family's power?" Luo Jialan had been aggrieved for a long time. Today she could finally slap Gu Nianji in the face. Felt so good. She didn't want to give up this opportunity. Gu Nianji cocked her head and smiled. "If you're sick, go see a doctor. There's no use telling me. Besides, what's wrong with growing up under the same roof as Hua Xiao? You are cousins, isn't it normal for you to grow up under the same roof? If this can be used as evidence of your delusions, I think you should really see a psychiatrist. Your mentality is not only twisted but also abnormal." "You said I'm a pervert?" Luo Jialan's elation didn't last long. Like a balloon, it was punctured by Gun Yenji. She was so angry that her face turned purple. You're just jealous of my good relationship with Xiaoheng. TSK. Gun Yenji shook her head. I wanted to save you some face, but it looks like I was overthinking it. You don't even care about your face, so why should I save you face? Luo Jialan was a little flustered. She said fiercely, don't try to continue humiliating me. There are surveillance cameras here. I won't humiliate you. I'll tell you the truth. Gun Yenji spread her hands. You said that you're not related to Huo Xiao by blood, but before you knew that you and Huo Xiao weren't biological cousins, you had been coveting him for a long time. You have such dirty thoughts and you still say that you're not a pervert? I'm not. And I already knew that I'm not related to him by blood. Luo Jialan growled. Don't try to put your dirty thoughts on me. Oh? You already knew? Then you have even more unfathomable intentions. You know that you have nothing to do with the Huo family, but you're the only daughter of the Huo family's eldest son. You're the Huo family's housekeeper, and you even mistreated the Huo family's real mistress, Miss Song. I think you're not only mentally twisted and perverted but also morally corrupt and vicious. Gun Yenji's face darkened. Also, you know that you're not Uncle Huo's biological daughter, but you still seized his trust fund and lived a luxurious life with other people's money. Look at you, you're nothing without the Huo family, and you still have the face to say that I'm just trying to get into the Huo family. I think every word you say is from the bottom of your heart. You can completely empathize with me. Luo Jialan took 2 steps back, flustered by Gun Yenji's words. Don't talk nonsense. Although I'm not my father's biological daughter, my mother and my father are truly husband and wife. I'm my father's legal daughter, and I'll inherit all of his inheritance. Miss Gu, you're a lawyer. You know better than I do, right? Will you inherit all of it? Gun Yenji curled her lips and said slyly, I won't entertain you with this question. As a lawyer you have to pay to talk to me. Even if you want to be slapped in the face by me, you have to line up and pay according to the rules. With that, she closed the door of the private room. Luo Jialan stared at the closed door in front of them with her mouth agape. She pointed at the door and said, She gave up just because she couldn't win against me? So that's all there is to Gun Yenji. I thought she was amazing, but she actually closed the door because she couldn't win against us. Kai Xingnan had been standing by the side without saying a word. At this moment, her heart skipped a beat. She raised her eyebrows and looked Luo Jialan up and down. You've liked Major General Huo since you were young? Isn't he your cousin? I don't like Xiaoheng. Besides, he's not my biological cousin. Luo Jialan was getting impatient. How many times have I told you? I'm not related to him by blood, and I've also changed my surname and moved out of the Huo family's household registration. You knew that Major General Huo wasn't your cousin from the beginning? Kai Xingnan frowned. Gun Yenji just said that you wanted to fake marry Major General Huo. What's going on? Luo Jialan said nonchalantly, It wasn't me who suggested it. It was my grandfather Huo. He didn't want Gun Yenji to marry into the Huo family, so he suggested that Xiaoheng and I get a marriage certificate and stop Gun Yenji from marrying into the family. I was kind enough to persuade Gun Yenji to accept this condition. Anyway, I'm not really getting married. I'm just acting as a cover for her. It doesn't matter if Xiaoheng continues to be with Gun Yenji. I just want the old man to be happy in his old age. I see, then your sacrifice is quite big. Kai Xingnan said sarcastically. How could she think of getting a fake marriage with Huo Xiaoheng? Luo Jialan smiled as if she didn't hear the sarcasm in Kai Xingnan's words. She said lightly, That's the truth. If you don't believe me, you can ask Grandfather Huo yourself. She was sure that Kai Xingnan wouldn't be able to come into contact with Grandfather Huo, and even if Kai Xingnan asked, Grandfather Huo, who had always been very chauvinistic, would definitely take responsibility for this matter and wouldn't say that Luo Jialan had suggested it. Was it really Grandfather Huo who suggested it? Then this old man is quite imaginative. Kai Xingnan smiled and turned back to the window with Luo Jialan. She said, Since I'm going to be your lawyer, let's sign the contract first. I'll make it clear in advance that my fee is very expensive. It's $1,000 per hour and $1 million in advance. If you agree, I'll have my secretary send you the contract right away. Sure, send it to me and I'll sign it right away, Luo Jialan said readily. I don't have the contract with me. My secretary will contact you to sign it and then tell you what to do next. Kai Xingnan smiled as she sent an email to her secretary, stating the amount of the advance payment. Considering that she was going to fight Gun Yenji head-on this time, Kai Xingnan suggested that the advance payment be increased to $1 million, with any overpayment to be refunded. She raised the price because she was worried that Luo Jialan's money would be recovered by the Huo family. So she had to get her hands on the money first. The two of them discussed the details and started lunch. At that moment, He Jichu returned to his private room. As soon as he entered, he said to Gu Nianji, who was playing with her phone, "Nianji, the situation in Japan has changed." "What's wrong?" Gu Nianji looked up in surprise. "Isn't today the day the final verdict will be announced?" "Yes, but Smith just called me in Japan and said that the presiding judge suddenly died this morning. The case has been transferred to another judge and the verdict will be postponed." This was the second update of the day, Chapter 1293, Words from the Heart. The first update of 100,000 Chidian coins that the leader of Momo Moshi had rewarded in August had arrived. Today was Monday and she had forgotten the recommendation ticket list. At 8:00 p.m. the third update. P.S. Thank you to Ding Yujin for the 10,000 views that you rewarded yesterday. Mwah. Chapter 1304. The presiding judge died suddenly? Gu Nianji's heart sank. Isn't this Angel in the World Foundation a little too powerful? You should be mentally prepared. He Jichu sat down with an indifferent expression. Don't forget what kind of research they're doing. This kind of research had been strongly supported by the Japanese imperial government and the military decades ago. Gu Nianji frowned. But we're using lawyers from big American law firms. Would they dare to say no to the American government? If it's a big deal, they'll dare to say no to anyone. Ijichu tapped his fingers on the dining table. Alright, don't think too much about it. All they can do is stall for a little more time. Then why are they stalling for time? Are they trying to transfer their assets? Gu Nianji's expression was cold and murderous. Ijichu was amused by her little expression. He smiled slightly and was still very calm. He pushed Guan Yin in front of Gu Nianji. Don't worry, they won't be transferred that easily. I'm inclined to think that they still want to struggle on their deathbed. As for transferring their assets, they'll have to spit it out wherever they go. Gu Nianji thought about it. Modern society was highly networked, and it was actually easier to track down the flow of funds than in the previous cash society, so she wasn't worried anymore. The two of them had lunch there. When they went out, they ran into Luo Jialan and Kai Xingnan in the parking lot again. The two of them were walking to their cars. When they saw He Jichu and Gu Nianji walking over together, they stopped in their tracks and watched them approach with smiles. Gu Nianji had wanted to pretend that she didn't know them, but they didn't think so. Lawyer He, Miss Gu, I didn't expect to meet you again. Luo Jialan greeted them with a beaming face. Miss Gu, your market is really good. First, you have our Xiaoheng at your beck and call, and now you have Lawyer He's devoted protection. You're really lucky with women. Gu Nianji was about to throw up when she said, our Xiaoheng to Luo Jialan, but she also understood that if she went berserk again, it would only satisfy Luo Jialan's perverted mentality. So she walked past them expressionlessly and didn't respond to a single word. She had said everything she needed to say at the restaurant. If she continued, Luo Jialan would really have to pay her consultation fee. He Jichu glanced at Luo Jialan coldly. His eyes were cold and devoid of any warmth. Luo Jialan caught a glimpse of He Jichu's expression from the corner of her eye, and her heart turned cold. She instinctively took a step back and forced herself to say, but don't worry, I won't tell anyone else, especially Xiaoheng. I won't say a word. He Jichu stood in front of her and looked at her carefully. He said coldly, it's better to be lucky with women than to not have a man. Luo Jialan's heart skipped a beat, but she immediately reacted. She smiled and said, so lawyer He admits that you have feelings for Gu Nianji? TSK, that's not good. She's clearly engaged, yet she's still walking around with another man. Luo Jialan, right? You're probably living in the era 200 years ago, when a woman would be drowned in a pig's cage for having a meal with a man outside. He Jichu said nonchalantly as he took out a recording pen from his pocket. I've already recorded everything you said just now. It's up to you whether you want to hand it over to the court as evidence, or use it as proof that you haven't given up on Huo Xiaoheng. What kind of person was this? His casual words were being recorded. Luo Jialan's face turned pale with fright. She clenched her fists tightly and said in a trembling voice, when did I not give up on Major General Hua? Oh no, when did I have feelings for Major General Hua? Don't slander me and ruin my reputation. You didn't? If you didn't, then why do you keep saying, our Xiaoheng? What's your relationship with He Xiaoheng that makes you address him so intimately? He Jichu was still holding the recording pen and continued to record. Kai Xingnan's eyes flashed. She wanted to say something but she kept her mouth shut. I'm his relative, his cousin. Why can't I use that title? Luo Jialan was furious, but she was still struggling at death's door. Cousin? What's your surname? He Jichu looked Luo Jialan up and down, the disdain in his eyes undisguised. You gave up everything in the He family. It's too late to regret it now. I didn't. Luo Jialan's entire body was trembling. Was this what she wanted? If she couldn't marry He Xiaoheng, she would have to face the fate of being sued. Look at her now, Gun Yanji was eyeing her covetously. But if her surname was still Hua and she was in the He family's household register, how could she marry He Xiaoheng? Therefore she cut off all means of retreat and resolutely changed her surname and moved out of the He family's household register. All she had to do was wait for grandfather Hua's order and she would get her marriage certificate with He Xiaoheng. It was all her fault. It was all because of this orphan girl who had come out of nowhere and ruined her plans. He Jichu sneered and said, You didn't give up everything in the He family? Or you didn't regret giving up everything in the He family? Luo Jialan choked. She realized that no matter what she said, she seemed to have fallen into He Jichu's trap. However, He Jichu had no intention of letting her go. Tell me you didn't give up everything in the He family? Then you changed your surname and moved out of the He family's household register. It's all fake? Gun Yanji was surprised. It's all fake? Aya, if you didn't change your surname and move out of the He family, then why are you talking about getting married? Do you think the military's background check is just for show and can't find out that you're faking it? I'm not faking it. Luo Jialan was finally forced into a corner by He Jichu and Gun Yanji. She had no choice but to clarify herself. What I'm saying is that I don't regret giving up everything in the He family. I have nothing to do with the He family. Alright then, I hope you'll keep your word and return what belongs to the He family to them. He Jichu put away the recording pen and got into the military jeep with Gun Yanji. Gun Yanji smiled as she drove the military jeep out of the garage of Luhuta restaurant. She said, Professor, he was so impressive just now. I didn't expect you to use a recording pen. He Jichu's shimmering almond-shaped eyes flashed. I sent this recording to Major General Hua. Gun Yanji. In the office building of the Special Operations Forces, He Xiaoheng held a meeting for 2 days and finally settled everything for the trip to Russia. When he received He Jichu's message and heard the recording, He Xiaoheng's face was expressionless. However, the pen in his hand was broken in half with a snap. He suddenly raised his hand and threw the broken pen into the trash can in the corner. He Xiaoheng dialed Gun Yanji's number. Major General Hua, is that you? Are you done? Gun Yanji's surprised voice came from the Bluetooth headset. He Xiaoheng grunted. Where are you? I'll pick you up. No need, I'll drive back soon. Gun Yanji looked at her watch. I'll take Professor He home first. Gun Yanji almost said that He Jichu had to renovate the kitchen because of egg fried rice, but she held back when she saw He Jichu's uncomfortable expression. He Xiaoheng nodded. Then I'll wait for you. Gun Yanji smiled and said gently, Okay. Gun Yanji didn't get out of the car after sending He Jichu all the way back to his villa on the mountainside. She said to He Jichu, Professor He, I'll take you here. When I go back and sort out the information, I'll send you the first version of the indictment. He Jichu grunted and took out a key card and a set of keys from his pocket. He stuffed them into Gun Yanji's hand and said uncomfortably, This is also your home. Come visit often when you're free. Gun Yanji, she smiled sheepishly and declined. No need, Professor He, but I'll definitely visit you often in the future. Take it and be good. He Jichu was very insistent. This is part of the dowry I prepared for you. When you hold your wedding in the future, you can get married here. With that, he pushed open the car door and quickly went into the house. This was the third watch of the day, chapter 1294, Clear Yourself. Good night, dear ones. Chapter 1305. Gun Yanji held the key card and a bunch of keys. It was like fire was burning her palm. Without another word, she opened the door and got out of the car, chasing after them. Professor He. Professor He. He Jichu heard her scream but didn't stop. He ran to the front door of his villa without stopping. The 500-meter walk was neither too long nor too short. He Jichu arrived at his own door first. He took out his key card and swiped open the cherry wood door. He then entered the house and slammed the door. He leaned against the door, raised his head and took a deep breath. He looked at the empty hall in front of him and the crystal chandelier hanging from the high ceiling. The sparkling and translucent crystal reflected in his moist black pupils, flashing like a sky full of stars falling into his eyes. Gunyanji was already at the door. She banged on it and yelled, "Professor He, open the door. Professor He, you can't do this." Casually tossing her a key card and a bunch of keys, how was she going to explain herself when she got back? Gunyanji banged on the door for a long time, but Hijichu didn't open it. She didn't care anymore and spoke into the intercom at the door. "Professor He, I'm opening the door." Hijichu, damn it. He had forgotten about that. Hijichu turned to open the door. Gunyanji happened to be holding up the key card and was about to swipe it on the sensor at the door. The cherry wood door suddenly opened, and Gunyanji took the opportunity to hand the door card to Hijichu. She said solemnly, "Professor He, I appreciate your kindness but I can't accept this gift. It was too expensive." It had already exceeded the scope of ordinary gifts. Gunyanji had grown up with Huashaoheng, so she had no qualms about using the things he gave her. She had no qualms about using them, but it wasn't the same for others. Moreover, Huashaoheng had always taught her that if she needed anything, she could just ask him. She was not allowed to ask for anything from others, nor was she allowed to accept anything that exceeded a certain value from others. Hijichu's eyes dimmed. He didn't take the door card and key. Instead, he said dryly, "Must you be so clear with me? Professor He, I'm already very satisfied that you accepted me as a graduate student and helped me with my studies and career. But I really can't accept this." "You can't take it? What are you going to do about your wedding? Marry out of Huashaoheng's family? You're not embarrassed to get married, but I'm embarrassed to watch you get married." Hijichu said expressionlessly. His shimmering almond-shaped eyes retracted their sharpness, and the expression in his eyes was inexplicably deep. Gunyanji quickly said, "I have my own house. It's on the 4th Ring Road near B University. Professor He has been there before. Your apartment is just a utility room. If I were to marry from there, where would I put my face? I don't believe that Huashaoheng won't prepare another place for you to get married." Hijichu was a little angry. Huashaoheng used to be your guardian, so it's understandable that you lived and ate his food. But now that you're an adult and want to get married and have a wedding, you still have the nerve to ask Huashaoheng to pay for your dowry? Gunyanji was flabbergasted. A 2-bedroom, 1-living-room apartment of more than 100 square meters had been called a utility room. If her house had a spirit, it would definitely be crying about being looked down upon. Stop fooling around. Keep the key in the card. After your wedding, I'll give you the ownership certificate of this villa. Hijichu patted her head and said reluctantly, "Let Brother He do one last thing for you. After you're officially married, we won't be able to interact like this anymore." Hijichu knew that Gunyanji and Huashaoheng had already received their marriage certificate, but they hadn't held a wedding, so Hijichu wouldn't acknowledge it. Moreover, Hijichu was still brooding over Huashaoheng's method of forcing Gunyanji to sign. In order to make things difficult for Huashaoheng, he had to spare no effort to get close to Gunyanji. Gunyanji knew that even if he was her biological brother, she had to keep a certain distance. Not to mention that they weren't even relatives. She was moved to tears by Hijichu. Holding the key and card in her hand, she whimpered, "Professor He, don't be so nice to me. I don't deserve it. I'm afraid." Hijichu was originally full of melancholy, but now he was so angry that he laughed. "Can't I be nice to you? You're so hard to please." "It's not that I can't, but Professor He, you're so nice to me. Even biological siblings are rarely as nice as you are." Gunyanji wiped her tears. "Just tell me the truth. What's your relationship with me? If there's really nothing between us, I definitely can't take this." Gunyanji was very stubborn this time. All this time, she had never forced Hijichu to reveal what had happened in the past, even if she had always felt that Hijichu knew about her childhood. But as long as Hijichu didn't want to, she would never force him. Hijichu closed his eyes and thought about what had happened back then. At this point, there was no need to talk about it anymore. But if he didn't say anything, Gunyanji probably wouldn't accept his gift. "Come in. If you want to know, I can tell you." Hijichu stepped aside. Gunyanji's heart was pounding. Holding the key card in one hand and the key in the other, her palms were covered in sweat. She sat down in Hijichu's living room and looked at him silently. Hijichu sat across from her with his legs crossed. He rested one hand on the sofa's armrest and the other on his leg. He stared at Gunyanji and said slowly, "Nyenji, do you trust me?" Gunyanji nodded. "Of course I do." There are two people in this world that I trust unconditionally. One is Major General Hua and the other is you, Professor He. Her trust in Hua Xiaoheng was formed from being with him day and night for the past 7 years and being influenced by what she saw and heard. And her trust in He Jichu had been influenced by He Jichu's selfless help in just 2 short years. And the longer she spent with He Jichu, the more she felt like she was meeting him for the first time. It was like returning to an old friend. She didn't know why this feeling was getting stronger and stronger. She only knew that He Jichu was showing signs that he was closely related to her forgotten past. He Jichu was very pleased with Gu Nianji's answer. She was still his Sirius, the little girl who trusted him wholeheartedly, the little girl who could be carried by him in the middle of the night to watch the night epiphyllum bloom. Nianji, if you trust me, then remember what I said. If someone says something different from what I said in the future, I hope you can use your own mind to think about who is telling the truth and who is lying to you. He Jichu pointed to his head with an exceptionally serious expression. Gu Nianji also became serious. She sat up straight and nodded. Please go ahead, Professor He. Our He and Gu families have a deep relationship. My grandfather, He Shouwang, and your grandfather, Gu Haoze, were both survivors of the Japanese Operation Borrowed Seed against the Huaxia Empire, He Jichu said slowly. Gu Nianji suddenly remembered that her grandfather, Gu Haoze, had mentioned my friend He Shouwang in his letter. The enemy leader was furious and tortured and killed my friend He Shouwang. My friend He Shouwang's son He Qingjian followed me to Europe. On the way he learned of his father's tragic situation. He swore to avenge his father and left quietly. These 2 sentences echoed in Gu Nianji's mind. She covered her mouth and said in surprise, "Wait, He Shouwang is your grandfather? Then He Qingjian is your father?" The man who had called her in the Russian Kremlin that day was He Jichu's father, He Qingjian? He Jichu nodded. Yes, my father is He Qingjian. So that's how it is. Gu Nianji was filled with emotion. That made sense. Why did He Jichu seem to know her past so well? It was because the 2 families were family friends. From grandfather to father and now to their generation. He Jichu smiled. Now do you understand why I said you were my fiancé? Our father joked that if they had children in the future and it was a boy and a girl, they would become husband and wife. You also said it was a joke. Gu Nianji blinked and changed the topic. How can you take it seriously? But what happened after that? Do you know where my father went? He Jichu sighed. His eyes flashed and he reorganized his words. He said slowly, that's a question I can't answer. 7 years ago your father's plane crashed and you were taken away from home. After I found out that you were missing, I started looking for you everywhere. It wasn't until 3 years ago that I finally found out that you were in the Huaxia Empire. In order to come to her side without batting an eyelid, He Jichu had put in a lot of effort and taken a big detour. In the end, he had predicted everything, but he hadn't expected that Gu Nianji wouldn't remember him at all. I tried to awaken your memory, but whenever you tried to recall it, your head would hurt like hell. I later felt that it was fine if you didn't remember the past. People always have to look forward, don't they? He Jichu's expression was still cold and aloof, but his tone was like a spring breeze, warm and genial. Gu Nianji's heart warmed when she heard that. She picked up a tissue from the coffee table in front of her and wiped her tears. Professor He, you can call me Brother He. That's what you always called me when you were young. He Jichu looked at her coolly, his gaze devoid of any warmth. It was as if all the fire and heat had been frozen by him. Gu Nianji pursed her lips. It didn't matter when I was young, but now that I'm so old, I'm getting goosebumps if I keep calling you Brother He. I'll still call you Professor He. It's familiar and intimate. Up to you. He Jichu didn't insist. He leaned forward and smiled. Now can you accept this gift? Although you're not married to me, with the relationship between our families, I'm more than enough to be part of your family. If you still refuse, not only will you disappoint me, but you'll also disappoint the elders of both families. Since He Jichu had already said this, Gu Nianji would really be unreasonable if she didn't accept it. However, she didn't know how Hua Xiaoheng would react if she accepted such a large sum of money just like that. Gu Nianji really had a headache. She focused her eyes and thought about it. I still have to discuss this with Hua Xiao. Professor He, can I give you an answer after I've discussed it with Hua Xiao? Look, girls are really extroverted. You haven't even married him yet, but you're already siding with him. Are you stupid? This is my dowry for you. It's a private property that I've specially given you. It's not a joint property with Hua Xiaoheng. If you hadn't gotten your marriage certificate a long time ago, I would have asked you to notarize it as a prenuptial property. Hijichu lowered his eyes and smiled mockingly. Although Hua Xiaoheng might not be interested in this small amount of money, others might not. Everyone thinks you're an orphan girl without a family to rely on. Don't you want to slap those people in the face? This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1295, I'm Your Reliance. The monthly votes should reach 1,500 today, so add updates in advance. So it was still the third update. At 1 p.m., the monthly votes would increase to 1,500, and the third update would be at 8 p.m. Mwah. Chapter 1306. Hijichu's suggestion was very tempting. And it just so happened that she had argued with Luo Jialan today, so it was impossible for Gunyanji not to have any thoughts. She hesitated for a moment, then frowned and said, Professor He, is it really that important to have a family or not? Although I don't have parents for the time being, I work hard and achieve good results. I won't embarrass Major General Hua, and I can help him when necessary. Why do they just look down on me? How should I put it, Nianji? I don't want to lie to you. But at a certain level, it won't work for a person to fight alone. That's why you need the help of a family and even marriage to strengthen yourself. Hijichu seemed to know a lot about this. But you don't have to be discouraged. Hijichu smiled lightly. When your man's strength reaches a certain level, he'll be able to fight a whole class on his own. The corners of Gunyanji's mouth twitched. No matter how she thought about it, it didn't sound reliable. Professor, he is wise. That's what I think. Actually, there are pros and cons to this kind of thing. A girl from a family might be a help, but it might also be a hindrance. I don't have a family, so I don't have a strong foundation. But as long as I control myself, I definitely won't cause Major General Hua any trouble. Hijichu stared at Gunyanji and thought about it silently for a while. He nodded. It's good that you can think it through. Anyway, it's not like you don't have a family now. I'm your family. If anyone looks down on you in the future, I'll teach them a lesson. That's not necessary. Gunyanji smiled. I can take care of it myself. But thank you, Professor He. I'm very happy to hear you say that. This was the first time she had expressed her joy at Hijichu's help. She didn't reject him like before. Hijichu's mood improved a little and he continued, in addition to this villa, I've also prepared other dowry for you. When you've confirmed the wedding date, I'll send it to you. Gunyanji quickly waved her hand. Professor He, I'm already ashamed to accept this big gift of yours. If you add to it, how can I repay this favor in the future? I told you not to stand on ceremony with me. If you don't want it, keep it for your children, Hijichu said lightly, not caring what Gunyanji thought at all. The topic of the two suddenly jumped from dowry to children. The jump was too big. Gunyanji blushed a little and muttered, You're thinking too much. The wedding date hasn't even been decided yet. What? Hua Xiaoheng isn't in a hurry to marry you? Hijichu was a little surprised and his expression darkened. The Russian president has already announced that he will be a witness to your wedding. Can he pretend not to hear it? No. Gunyanji shook her head. It's like this. Ever since Bai Shuang passed away, Brother Zhe had been depressed. Brother Xiong and I are planning to wait at least a year before we hold our wedding. We don't want to upset him, so... Hijichu understood. He actually didn't want Gunyanji to get married so early. His current state was pretty good. Although they had registered their marriage, it had always been kept a secret. Everyone only knew that Gunyanji and Hua Xiaoheng were engaged, but they didn't know that they had been secretly married for almost a year. Hijichu was about to speak when Gunyanji's phone rang. Whose past did the Priestess Temple Expedition bow and arrow belong to? I like the image of you belonging to me in the crowd. This was Hua Xiaoheng's exclusive ringtone. Gunyanji was delighted. She quickly picked up her phone and swiped it open. She said softly, Major General Hua? Hua Xiaoheng sat in his bulletproof car and looked at Hijichu's West Mountain villa outside the window. He said calmly, Where are you? Gunyanji, I'm still at Professor He's place. Something happened and I just settled it. Gunyanji gestured to Hijichu and stood up. I'll leave right away. Hijichu stood up as well. I'll drive you. Gunyanji didn't refuse. She held her phone and walked out of his villa with Hijichu to her car. Professor He, you can go back. I'll drive myself. I'll be fine. Hijichu nodded. Drive carefully. Call me when you get back to let me know you're safe. Okay. Gunyanji obeyed and was much more obedient than when she came. She drove the military jeep out of Hijichu's villa's iron gate. As soon as she looked up, she saw a familiar silver-gray bulletproof car parked on the side of the road opposite the villa. Gu Nianji. This wasn't Huo Xiaoheng's car. Had he been making a call here just now? Gu Nianji slammed on the brakes and parked the car by the side of the road. She poked her head out of the window to take a look. The car's window glass was coated with a high-grade coating. It was hard to see inside from the outside, but it was very clear from the inside. The window of the silver-gray bulletproof car slowly rolled down, revealing Huo Xiaoheng's bright and solemn face. He was charming. It really was him. Gu Nianji waved her hand with a smile and pointed at the road down the mountain. Shall we go down together? Huo Xiaoheng looked at her indifferently and said, Get out of the car. Gu Nianji, come here, Huo Xiaoheng said again. His words were concise and to the point. Gu Nianji was a little troubled, but what about her car? She couldn't just leave it here and ask He Jichu to send it back to her tomorrow, could she? Huo Xiaoheng raised his chin. Yin Shixiang jumped out of the car and waved at Gu Nianji. Nianji, get out. This car is mine. He winked at Gu Nianji and smiled. Gu Nianji blushed but still opened the door and got out. Brother Xiong, why are you here too? Why can't I be here? I'm just here to be your driver, right? Yin Shixiang smiled and raised his hand to give her a rash. Hurry up, Huo Xiao is going to flip out if you're late. No way? He's really going to flip out? Gu Nianji was in a great mood. She moved closer to Yin Shixiang and said sneakily, Then how about I stall for a little longer and see what Huo Xiao will do when he flips out? Huo Xiaoheng sat in the car and looked at her quietly. How dare she make trouble? Huo Xiaoheng's expression didn't change, but he was actually pressing Gu Nianji on his lap and spanking her on the inside. His voice lowered. Nianji, get in the car. Hurry up, the old driver is about to drive. Yin Shixiang chuckled and got into the military jeep that Gu Nianji had driven over in time before Huo Xiaoheng's sharp gaze landed on him. The car door was quickly locked. Gu Nianji had no choice but to get into Huo Xiaoheng's car. Huo Xiaoheng's head orderly, Fan Jian, was the driver in the front seat. Huo Xiaoheng sat in the back. A partition had already been raised between the two rows of seats. Gu Nianji dawdled in the back seat. She could sense that Huo Xiaoheng was in a bad mood. She didn't dare move closer. She wanted nothing more than to sit close to the window so that she and Huo Xiaoheng were far apart. Huo Xiaoheng's expression was calm as he said to Fan Jian, Drive. The silver bulletproof car let out a low roar and shot out like an arrow. Gu Nianji didn't even have time to fasten her seatbelt before she was almost thrown into the seat by the momentum of the car. The back seat wasn't very long. Gu Nianji swayed left and right and inevitably bumped into Huo Xiaoheng. Huo Xiaoheng quietly extended an arm to cover Gu Nianji's back. Gu Nianji wanted to get up and return to her seat by the window, but Huo Xiaoheng's arm pressed her back down as soon as she moved. She had no choice but to maintain the position of lying sideways in his arms. This position was very tiring. This was the second update of the day. The monthly ticket of 1,500 plus updates had arrived in advance. Chapter 1296. This position is tiring. 8 o'clock in the evening, the third update. Moi. Huo Xiaoheng frowned. Are these the door cards and keys to his West Mountain villa? Gu Nianji nodded. It's too expensive. You shouldn't accept it. As expected, Huo Xiaoheng refused. He even immediately asked Fan Jian to turn around and return to He Jichu's West Mountain villa. He wanted to return the access card and key in person. Gu Nianji pressed down on Huo Xiaoheng's arm and whispered. But I've already accepted it. Huo Xiaoheng was slightly sullen. What did I teach you in the past? You can't just take other people's things. Have you forgotten? I haven't forgotten, Gu Nianji said calmly. But I have a reason why I have to accept it. Speak. Professor He's grandfather is He Shouwang. His father is He Qingjian. Our families are friends, so he gave me a gift to show that he wants to be on good terms. Are you sure? Huo Xiaoheng's eyes flashed as he asked. If He Shouwang and He Qingjian were really He Jichu's grandfather and father, then He Jichu really did have a relationship with Gu Nianji. He just didn't know if Gu Xiangwen and He Qingjian had interacted before. In their previous generation, He Shouwang and Gu Haoze were good friends. In their next generation, He Jichu and Gu Nianji had a good relationship. What about Gu Xiangwen and He Qingjian? How was their relationship? Huo Xiaoheng couldn't help asking, Did Professor He say anything about your father? Did your father, Gu Xiangwen, and He Jichu's father, He Qingjian, also know each other? Of course they know each other. Gu Nianji nodded with a smile. She moved closer to Hua Xiaoheng and whispered, "Don't be angry when I tell you. Professor, he said that his father and my father once joked that if their children were a boy and a girl, then become husband and wife." Hua Xiaoheng snorted. Such an old-fashioned thing does seem like something an overseas Chinese person would do. This was very awkward and also very mean. Gu Nianji reached out and touched the tense lines on Hua Xiaoheng's face. She smoothed them inch by inch and smiled as she whispered into his ear, "Don't be angry. You're especially charming when you're angry. It makes me want to have sex with you." Hua Xiaoheng, she was getting bolder and bolder. She even dared to tease him. However, it had to be said that Gu Nianji knew Hua Xiaoheng very well. Only she could appease his hidden emotions. He held Gu Nianji's hand that was wreaking havoc on his face and brought it to his lips to kiss it. He then moved closer to Gu Nianji's ear and curled his lips. His voice was low and magnetic. "You're especially charming when you're acting like a demon." Gu Nianji's face instantly turned as red as blood. Even the corners of her eyes and eyebrows were stained with rouge. She glared at Hua Xiaoheng. "That's too much. How can you say that? Where's your image as the chief?" "Same here." Hua Xiaoheng looked at her with a smile. The chief's wife doesn't even care about her image. Does the chief still need it? Sigh. Gu Nianji covered her face. Her heart was pounding like a deer. Compared to these veterans, she was still too inexperienced. Hua Xiaoheng stopped teasing her and put his arm around her shoulder without saying a word. After she calmed down, he changed the topic as if nothing had happened and said, "Have you discussed the prosecution of Luo Jialan with Professor He?" Gu Nianji's head was still lowered. She nodded slightly and whispered, "We've discussed it. Professor He gave me a procedure list for the indictment. I'll go back and change it according to the procedure." "Do you need evidence?" Hua Xiaoheng added, "There's not much physical evidence, but we can find a witness right away." Gu Nianji came back to her senses and looked up at Hua Xiaoheng. "You mean Auntie Xing and Auntie Yu?" "Yes. They were fired, but they've been under our surveillance." Hua Xiaoheng paused for a moment, then reminded Gu Nianji, "Although I support you in charging Luo Jialan with intentional homicide, the process of obtaining evidence is indeed very complicated. Because even Auntie Xing and Auntie Yu didn't know that what they did would kill Ms. Song." This was the third update of the day, Chapter 1297, Major General Hua, I was wrong. Good night, dear ones. Chapter 1308. Really? They really don't know? Gu Nianji asked in confusion. They must have been specially selected and professionally trained to be your full-time caregivers, right? Gu Nianji couldn't imagine that a family like the Hua family would randomly find two people from the babysitting market to take care of Song Jining. Hua Xiaoheng lowered his eyes and said lightly, "At that time, my father was in charge of finding people. I wasn't at home. He left home to go to college and then join the army, so he rarely went home. After saving Gu Nianji, he received the task of guarding Gu Nianji from the military. For 6 years he hadn't returned to his own home even once. It wasn't until more than a year ago that Gu Nianji wanted to come to the imperial capital for graduate school, that he took her back to his home in the military." Gu Nianji shook her head speechlessly. Fine, these two people could really have been randomly found from the babysitting market. Forget it, she made a note in her electronic notes. It was already afternoon when she followed Hua Xiaoheng back to the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces. Gu Nianji got out of the car and looked up at the hot sun in the sky. It was almost summer and the weather was gradually getting hotter. At 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it was the hottest time of the day. Gu Nianji wiped her sweat and suddenly felt the phone in her pocket vibrate again. She took it out and found that it was the driver from the Russian KGB who had sent her a message. Gu Nianji quickly unlocked her phone with her fingerprint and logged in. In the KGB trio discussion group, the driver sent a crying emoji and then sent a message in English. Middle-aged driver. Lena's body was found in a dark river connected to the giant circular pit, Gu Nianji. She quickly tapped her fingers on her phone and replied, "Is it confirmed? Is it really Lena? If it was found in the dark river, it would have been beyond recognition after so many days, right? Middle-aged driver, it's confirmed. The DNA test results just came out. It's confirmed to be Lena." There was a long silence. Gu Nianji didn't know what to say. She waited for a while and replied with a hug emoji. "Nianzi Zai, Uncle Ivan, my condolences. Where's Vladimir? He's also, my condolences, Uncle Driver." The boss fainted as soon as he saw the DNA test result. "Peter is taking over his position now. I hope he can recover soon." Gu Nianji was very sad. A few days ago he was still in the same car as them, but today it was confirmed that he was dead. Although Gu Nianji had been mentally prepared for Lina's death, she still felt very bad when she confirmed it. Rubbing her fingers on her phone, she sent the driver a red packet of 66 yuan to comfort him. She didn't have the nerve to text Vladimir. He always felt that it was ironic to comfort someone with a red packet when they were heartbroken. The driver was different. For him, the best consolation was a red packet. Sure enough, after the middle-aged driver accepted the red packet, he felt much better. He quickly typed on his phone and turned on the spamming mode. Uncle driver, boss doesn't believe that Lina is dead. He hasn't eaten, drank, slept, or rested for the past few days. He's been looking for her everywhere. Middle-aged driver. He has searched dozens of miles around the Tunguska crater in Siberia. I'm afraid an underground ant, male or female, can't escape his tracking. Middle-aged driver. In the end, we still got news of her death. Middle-aged driver. Peter personally led some people to discover it in the underground river. At first it was just a floating corpse. Later, someone said that it might be Lina because the underground river was directly connected to the Tunguska crater. Middle-aged driver. Peter ordered people to take the floating corpse away and conduct a DNA test. The result was that it was Lina. Middle-aged driver. Middle-aged driver? What unfortunate news. I'm sorry. I hope Lina can rest in peace in heaven. Candle. JPG. The two of them chatted for a while before the middle-aged driver said that he had a mission and logged out. Gu Nianji looked up and saw that she was standing under a big tree at the entrance of Hua Xiaoheng's official residence. The ginkgo trees in front of her towered into the sky, and the green leaves that looked like small fans shone brightly, making her eyes soar. Hua Xiaoheng stood silently beside her and reached out to hug her head, silently comforting her. Hua Xiaoheng had seen her group chat with the middle-aged driver. He also knew that Lina's death had been confirmed. It's okay. She died at her post. As a soldier, she died a worthy death. Hua Xiaoheng comforted Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji. She buried her head in Hua Xiaoheng's arms and smelled the refreshing and cold scent in his arms. Gu Nianji's uneasy heart gradually calmed down. This is your daily job. Gu Nianji murmured as she snuggled closer to him. You must take care of yourself. You must take care of yourself? Hua Xiaoheng patted her back and didn't say anything. He led her into the official residence's courtyard. The soldier standing guard in front of the door stood at attention and saluted Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng nodded and said calmly, "Thank you for your hard work. The weather is hot, so the time you have to stand guard outside can be shortened by an hour." "Thank you, Chief. We're not hot." The soldier replied loudly, his head raised high. Gu Nianji was embarrassed. She struggled out of Hua Xiaoheng's arms and held his hand as they walked up the steps. "Major General Hua, I actually knew that Lina was most likely dead, but it was still very hard to hear the news." Gu Nianji looked up at Hua Xiaoheng longingly. His profile was tall and firm, mighty and calm. It seemed that nothing could shake his tenacious self-control and steely will. Hua Xiaoheng said calmly, "It's normal to feel bad. It would be cold-blooded not to feel bad." Gu Nianji curled her lips. "Well, that's good. I thought you would say that I'm not strong enough." "Of course not." Hua Xiaoheng patted her head. "I don't think anyone has the right to say that you're not strong enough to walk out of the Alps alive after being hunted down." Gu Nianji's dark eyes darted around and she smiled. "Major General Hua, you have that much confidence in me?" Hua Xiaoheng smiled but didn't say anything. Gu Nianji returned to her room and wrote a letter to Speaker Long and the Secretariat of the Senate to request that her official start date be postponed. She wanted to settle Luo Jialan's lawsuit first. If she were to take up the position of Chief Legal Counsel of the Senate at the same time, there was a high chance that it would be detrimental to her lawsuit. Kai Xingnan had always been eyeing the position of Chief Legal Counsel. If she knew that Gu Nianji had officially started work, she would definitely not let go of this opportunity to discredit her. After a detailed discussion with her, Speaker Long agreed to her request, but requested that she delay her start date for no more than 3 months. After 3 months, regardless of whether Luo Jialan's case was resolved or not, she had to start work. Gu Nianji calculated the time and felt that it should be more than enough, so she agreed and even signed the contract for a delay. After settling the matters with the Senate, Gu Nianji began to draft the indictment. She listed the evidence she had collected in order of priority, including witness and physical evidence. After showing it to He Jichu, she handed it over to the prosecutor's office and requested that Luo Jialan be prosecuted. While the prosecutor's office was reviewing Gu Nianji's claim, Gu Nianji pondered and asked Hua Xiaoheng about the Hua family's trust fund. She planned to file a civil lawsuit at the same time as she filed a criminal lawsuit, asking Luo Jialan to repay the Hua family's trust fund. Hua Xiaoheng was silent for a moment before saying, "These trust funds actually don't belong to the Hua family, but to my grandmother." "So that means the trust fund actually belongs to the Xie family?" Gu Nianji immediately understood. "Is your grandmother's will still there?" The will requested that the trust fund be distributed according to the trust fund distribution plan under her name. Hua Xiaoheng explained briefly. Hua Xiaoheng's grandmother, Xie Zian, was the eldest daughter of the Xie family. Her assets and properties covered the entire Blue Planet. During her serious illness, she had placed most of her assets into 3 irrevocable trust funds in a certain proportion. Trust. 80% of this was placed into an irrevocable trust fund with Hua Xiaoheng as the beneficiary. Irrevocable trust fund meant that the trustor gave up all ownership of these assets. Only the beneficiary could change or revoke the specific terms of the trust fund. This meant that only the beneficiary was the true owner of these assets. The other 20% was divided equally into 2 portions. One portion was given to her eldest son, Hua Guanyuan, who was also Luo Jialan's nominal father. The other portion was given to her second son, Hua Guanchen, who was also Hua Xiaoheng's biological father. All the remaining assets were left to her husband, Hua Xuanong. However, Hua Xuanong had said at that time that he didn't need his wife's legacy. He had taken the initiative to place all the inheritance his wife had left him into an irrevocable trust fund with Hua Xiaoheng as the beneficiary. This way, more than 80% of Xie Zian's assets would be inherited by Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng's father, Hua Guanchen, also didn't use his mother's inheritance. He had once said that the trust fund under his name would be given to his grandson in the future. And what Luo Jialan had inherited now was the irrevocable trust fund that had been given to Hua Guanyuan. Gu Nianji gasped when she heard this. No wonder she could buy a villa in the West Mountains. 10% of your grandmother's assets are in her hands. Hua Xiaoheng's expression was calm, but a hint of gloominess flashed through his eyes. West Mountain Villa? Luo Jialan bought a villa in the West Mountains? Professor He and I went to the Luhuda restaurant in the West Mountains for dinner that day and met Luo Jialan. She said herself that she had property there. I'll have to check it out. Hua Xiaoheng thought about it. The last time he had asked Uncle Xie to help check the direction of the trust fund under Luo Jialan's name, it had confirmed that the trust fund had indeed transferred money to Seth's stepfather's bank account. However, Uncle Xie hadn't given him a follow-up response. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 1298, Confirmation of the News. It was still the 3rd update today. Dear friends, don't forget the monthly votes and recommendation votes. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the 2nd update of the 100,000 Qidian coins that the leader of Momo Moshi had rewarded in August. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the 3rd update. Moi. Chapter 1309. Hua Xiaoheng returned to his office and called Yin Shixiang in. He said, I asked you to investigate Luo Jialan's experiences over the years. How's your investigation going? Yin Shixiang quickly said, I told you before. Other than the year she was in Europe, which was a little difficult to investigate, everything else has been investigated. Hua Xiaoheng nodded. Have you asked our field agents to investigate Europe? I've informed them. But because Luo Jialan wasn't the target of their surveillance at that time, as you know, it's very difficult to make any substantial progress, Yin Shixiang said honestly. Although their people were scattered all over the world, they couldn't investigate whoever they wanted like they did in China, because they didn't have enough authority to use public equipment and facilities. Hua Xiaoheng pondered for a moment. Send what you found to my email. Yin Shixiang went back and forwarded the report on Luo Jialan to Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng looked at the time and estimated that it was around 7 in the morning in Europe. Although it was a little early, he still picked up the phone and called Uncle Xie. The phone rang 3 times before it was picked up. Is this Xiaoheng? Uncle Xie's gentle voice came through the phone. Hua Xiaoheng quickly said, Hello, is it convenient for you to speak now? Yes, I just came back from my morning jog, Uncle Xie said as he picked up the vitamin mineral water and took a big gulp. His name was Xie Beichen and he was one of the best of his generation in the Xie family. If there were no accidents, he would be the next head of the Xie family. If there was anything to ask the Xie family for help, Xie Beichen was definitely the most powerful candidate. Hua Xiaoheng smiled. It's good that I didn't disturb you. Whether I disturbed you or not, I still disturbed you. Xie Beichen smiled and put down the mineral water. He sat in front of the breakfast counter in the kitchen and began to browse through today's news reports. Uncle, you're amazing. Hu Xiaoheng complimented him and got back to business. Uncle, you said that there was a follow-up to the trust fund I asked you to investigate last time. I wonder how the investigation is going? Xie Beichen took out his iPad and entered the encrypted folder. He pulled out the information he had found and frowned. Xiaoheng, this matter is a little troublesome. What trouble? Wu Xiaoheng was a little surprised. Even the Xie family felt it was troublesome? Because your uncle is the beneficiary of that irrevocable trust fund. In other words, only he has the right to investigate the fund's flow. I was able to find out about the last fund transfer because it was through a Swiss bank. Our Xie family has shares in a Swiss bank and we also serve on the board of directors of a Swiss bank, so we can check it through a Swiss bank. If its flow isn't through a Swiss bank but through another bank, then it would be very difficult to. At the very least, we need to know which banks this trust fund money is in. Xie Beichen was very regretful. I'm sorry, I might not be able to help you much. Xiaoheng said. Xiaoheng thought. Xie. Bead, Hua said. That's Xie to the family to Hua. Said. Cheng I to say I he. Yes, so now it's your uncle's heir who can control this trust fund, Xie Beichen said indifferently. That Luo Jialan you're investigating, right? What? Wu Xiaoheng. He. Hua said. For a moment he even wondered if he should hack into the trust fund's computer network system. But what if the trust fund didn't put any useful materials online? Moreover, doing so would be detrimental to their case. Once it was revealed that their evidence was illegally obtained, the judge would directly discard these materials. That would be a huge loss. Therefore, what hackers obtained could only cause a sensation in the news, but it couldn't be used as evidence in court. An irrevocable trust fund only recognizes the beneficiary. That's something we can't change. Xie Beichen looked at his watch. I can send you what I found, but it won't be of much use. Hu Xiaoheng's eyes flashed. Okay, send it over for me to take a look. The two of them exchanged a few more pleasantries. Xie Beichen's father, Xie Xinxing, went downstairs for breakfast. When he heard Xie Beichen talking to Hu Xiaoheng on the phone, he asked Xie Beichen to turn on the speakerphone so that everyone could talk together. Hu Xiaoheng heard Xie Xinxing's voice and quickly greeted him. He then took the opportunity to invite the father and son back to China. Granduncle, uncle, do you have any plans to return to China in the near future? Xie Xinxing laughed. Xiaoheng, you want me to return to China to attend your wedding, right? The news of you proposing to that little girl in Russia has reached us. I asked Beichen to record the news and watch it every day when I have time. Xie Beichen's father, Xie Xinxing, was the current head of the Xie family. He was also Hu Xiaoheng's grandmother, Xie Zian's biological brother. Wedding? It won't be possible in the near future. Hu Xiaoheng picked up a few darts on his desk and threw them at the dartboard on the opposite wall. He said, I want you to come back because of Luo Jialan's lawsuit. I might need your help to find someone to testify in court. Xie Beichen understood and didn't ask why Hu Xiaoheng wouldn't be holding a wedding in the near future. He nodded. I can take some time to go back. If you need anything, just call this number. After a pause, Xie Beichen continued, your little fiancée's name is Gun Yanji, right? Hu Xiaoheng grunted. Give me her address. I have a gift for her. Xie Beichen wanted to show the Xie family's support for Hu Xiaoheng's marriage. The gift that Xie Beichen wanted to give definitely couldn't be described as a little. Hu Xiaoheng was very happy, but his expression remained calm. You're too kind. She's a junior, so she should be the one to show her filial piety to you. Xie Beichen, this nephew of his was good at everything, but he was too steady. He couldn't find a single mistake in any aspect. Xie Beichen felt suffocated. Xiaoheng, I'm scared when you say that. Xie Beichen joked with him with a half-smile. What are you afraid of? The more polite you are, the more I'm afraid that my gift won't be presentable. Xie Beichen laughed out loud. You really value Nianji very much. After all, he was someone who truly cared about him and understood his personality and conduct very well. That was how he came to such a conclusion. On the other hand, his grandfather and father at home were at a loss for words. Hu Xiaoheng sighed slightly in his heart, but he still smiled and said, then don't be afraid. Just treat it as helping Nianji collect her dowry. You also know that she doesn't have parents and grew up with me. Now that I'm marrying her, I'm worried that others will gossip and hurt her. Actually, Gun Yanji didn't care about what others said. All she cared about was whether Hua Xiaoheng really had her in his heart. However, Hua Xiaoheng couldn't pretend that the hurt didn't exist just because Gu Nianji didn't care anymore. Xie Xinxing listened from the side and understood what Hua Xiaoheng meant. He immediately decided to double the amount of gift he would give Gu Nianji. Xiaoheng Beichen might be busy, but I'm very free. I'll be returning to China next week and holding an engagement party for Nianji at the Diaotai State Guesthouse in the imperial capital. When that time comes, I want to see who dares to look down on the person that I, Xie Xinxing, want to support. He wanted to see Hua Xiaoheng happy. This was his sister Xie Xian's wish. He could also tell that after so many years, only Gu Nianji could make Hua Xiaoheng have the desire to get married, so he couldn't let anyone ruin Hua Xiaoheng's happiness. That's great. Hua Xiaoheng expressed his heartfelt gratitude. My grandfather can't say anything else now. Xie Xinxing sensed that something was wrong. Doesn't your grandfather agree to your marriage? Yes, grandfather once had a whimsical idea. He wanted me and Luo Jialan to get a marriage certificate and get a fake marriage. Hua Xiaoheng only said this lightly. Xie Xinxing was already exploding with anger. It was as if old and new hatred had surged into his heart. What? That old fart. Does he think that all of our Xie family members are dead? Tell him to wait. I'll go back immediately. I'll bring a basket back, break that old fart's bones, put them in the basket, and throw them in front of my sister's coffin as incense ash. This was today's second update, Chapter 1299, Looking for a Backer. Today was still the third update. Dear friends, don't forget the monthly votes and recommendation votes. The second update of the 100,000 Qidian coins that the leader of Momo Moshi had rewarded in August had arrived. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.